Tonight, we are going to explore 10 qualities from the Buddhist tradition that can change the way we meet our lives. They are known as the 10 Paramis, or perfections of the heart. They are preserved in stories of the Buddha's earlier lives, when he was still following the long path toward awakening. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. The 10 perfections are not commandments, and they are not about becoming flawless. These teachings offer practical ways to meet the difficulties of being human, how to remain honest when truth is uncomfortable, patient when life does not move at our pace, steady when circumstances change, and kind when the heart wants to close. They cannot prevent loss, uncertainty, and the hard parts of life, but they can change how we carry them. Tonight, we will explore each perfection through stories and quiet reflection. There is nothing to memorize and nothing you need to achieve. Simply listen, let your body settle, and notice where these qualities may already be present in your own life. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. Of all the qualities we will explore together, truthfulness comes first. It is the ground on which everything else stands. Without it, nothing we build will hold. And yet, truthfulness is not quite what you might expect. When we hear the word, we tend to think of it as something directed outward. Do not lie to other people. Do not deceive. Say what you mean. That is part of it, certainly. But the deeper teaching points somewhere else. It points inward, toward the stories we tell ourselves, toward the image we have constructed of who we are, what we want, and what we are doing with our lives, toward the gap between what we know to be true and what we pretend is true, even in the privacy of our own minds. Most of us are more honest with others than we are with ourselves. We can look a friend in the eye and speak plainly, but when we turn that same gaze inward, something flinches. We look away. We soften the picture. We tell ourselves that things are fine when they are not, or that we do not care about something when we do, or that a situation will resolve itself when we know, deep down, that it will not. This is not a character flaw. It is a habit, and like all habits, it can be changed. The reason truthfulness matters so much is simple. You cannot work with what you cannot see. If you want to develop any of the other qualities we will explore tonight, patience, wisdom, generosity, any of them, you must first be able to see yourself clearly. And you cannot see yourself clearly through a fog of comfortable stories. Truthfulness clears the fog. Here is a story that helps us understand this. There was once a ruler who was growing old and had no heir. He loved his kingdom and wanted to leave it in the hands of someone worthy. So he devised a test. He gathered all the children of the kingdom, hundreds of them, and gave each one a single seed. Plant this seed, he told them. Care for it. In 1 year, bring me what has grown. The child who brings me the most impressive result will be my successor. The children went home and planted their seeds. They watered them, tended them, watched for the first green shoot. But weeks passed and nothing happened. The seeds would not grow. In home after home across the kingdom, pots sat full of soil and empty of life. And so, one by one, the children began to cheat. Some asked their parents for seeds from the family garden. Some traded with neighbors. Some bought plants from the market and replanted them. Nobody talked about it openly, but everybody did it. It seemed like the obvious thing to do. The ruler had asked for results, and an empty pot felt like failure. But there was one child, a girl, who did not replace her seed. She watered the pot every day. She gave it the best soil she could find. And every day, nothing happened. She watched the other children's plants growing tall and green, and she felt a deep embarrassment. But she could not bring a plant she had not grown. It was not in her to pretend. When the year was up, the children gathered before the ruler. They came carrying beautiful plants, some taller than they were. Flowers in every color. Lush green leaves. It was an impressive sight. The girl came too. She carried her empty pot. She stood among all those magnificent plants with nothing to show, and she kept her eyes on the ground. The ruler walked among the children, examining their plants. He nodded, he smiled, but he said nothing. Then he reached the girl with the empty pot. He stopped. "What happened?" he asked. "I do not know," she said. "I planted the seed you gave me and cared for it every day. But it never grew. I have nothing to show you. This is all I have." The ruler looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the crowd. "1 year ago," he said, "I gave each of you a seed. But what I did not tell you is that every seed had been boiled before I gave it to you. None of them could grow. It was impossible." The room went quiet. "Every one of you," the ruler continued, "has brought me a plant that did not come from the seed I gave you. You replaced it. You found another way, and you pretended. Every one of you, except this child." He placed his hand on the girl's shoulder. "She is the one who told the truth, even when the truth was an empty pot. She is the one I can trust." This story has survived for centuries because it touches something we all recognize: the temptation to present ourselves as more than we are, the pressure to show results, to have something impressive to hold up, to never appear with an empty pot, and the courage it takes to stand there with nothing and say, "This is what is true." Most of us face this in smaller ways every day. Someone asks how we are doing, and we say fine when we are struggling. We present a version of our work that is slightly more polished than reality. We nod along in a conversation as though we understand when we do not. We stay silent about a mistake rather than naming it. Each of these is a small departure from truth, and each one, by itself, seems harmless. But they accumulate. In Buddhism, there is a word for this accumulation. It is sometimes translated as obscuration, the slow clouding over of something that was once clear. Over time, the small departures create a version of us that is not quite real, a version that requires maintenance, a version that takes energy to sustain, energy that could be going towards something more nourishing. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes from maintaining a false front. It is different from physical exhaustion. It is the tiredness of performing, of keeping track of what you said and to whom, of scanning for whether the performance is convincing, of living slightly off-center, just enough that you are never quite at rest. Many people carry this tiredness for years without identifying its source. They think they are tired because of work, or responsibilities, or not enough sleep, and perhaps those things contribute. But underneath all of it, there is often a deeper drain, the energy it takes to maintain the gap between who you are and who you are pretending to be. Close the gap, and something surprising happens. energy returns. Your circumstances have not changed, but you are no longer spending so much of yourself on upkeep. The truth, it turns out, is very low maintenance. It does not require a good memory. It does not need to be defended. It simply is. This is why truthfulness is described as a relief rather than a burden. When you stop maintaining the performance, something relaxes. You do not have to remember what you said, because what you said was true. You do not have to manage how you appear, because how you appear is how you are. The gap between inside and outside closes, and in that closing, there is a surprising amount of peace. The girl with the empty pot discovered this. She stood there with nothing, and she was the freest person in the room. Everyone else was managing a lie. She was just standing there, holding what was real. Here is another story, this one from the Zen tradition. A young student had been studying for several years. He had read widely, practiced diligently, and developed what he felt was a deep understanding. One day, he went to visit an elder teacher, hoping to demonstrate how far he had come. He sat before the teacher and began to speak. He spoke eloquently. He described how he had come to see that the self is an illusion, that all things are empty, that there is nothing to hold on to and nothing to fear. He quoted teachings he had memorized. He offered interpretations. He spoke with confidence and clarity. The teacher listened quietly through all of it, sitting with his hands folded in his lap, nodding occasionally. When the student finished, the room was still. Then, without warning, the teacher struck the table with the flat of his hand. A single sharp sound. The student flinched. His eyes widened. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe irritation, before he caught himself and settled back into composure. The teacher looked at him kindly. "If nothing exists," he said, "what just startled you?" The student had no answer. Everything he had said was still hanging in the air, all those words about emptiness and fearlessness and the illusory self. And yet his body had told a different story. It had flinched. It had reacted. Something in him had been surprised, and that something was very much alive and very much real, regardless of what his philosophy claimed. The teacher smiled and poured them both tea. This is where the Buddhist teaching on truthfulness goes deeper than simply not telling lies. In Zen, there is a phrase that points to it, direct pointing at reality. The idea is that truth is not something you arrive at through clever thinking. It is something already present, already happening, waiting to be noticed. The student in the story had constructed a beautiful description of reality. It sounded wise. It may even have contained some truth, but he was not living it. His body knew something his words did not. The gap between what he claimed and what he actually experienced was the gap that the teacher revealed. In Buddhism, this kind of gap has a name. It is called delusion, and it does not only mean believing something false. It means being out of contact with what is actually here. You can be deluded by a lie, certainly, but you can also be deluded by a truth that you hold as a concept rather than a lived experience. The student's ideas about emptiness were not wrong, exactly, but they were ideas, and he had mistaken them for the real thing. And notice how the teacher worked with this. He did not argue. He did not lecture. He did not tell the student he was wrong. He simply created a moment that was so immediate, so physical, that the students' ideas could not keep up. The sound of the hand on the table cut through everything. And in that gap, before the mind could reassemble its story, there was a flash of something honest. A flinch. A real response from a real person. This is what truthfulness looks like in the Zen tradition. It is the willingness to stay close to what is actually happening, even when what is actually happening contradicts the story you have been telling. Especially then. There is something deeply kind about this teaching. Truth is not a judge. It is not standing over you with a list of your failures. It is simply what is already happening, patiently waiting for you to notice. Your hunger, your tiredness, your longing, your fear, your joy. Whatever is real in this moment has been real for a while. It just needs to be acknowledged. Consider your own life for a moment. Are there places where you are maintaining a version of yourself that does not quite match what is real? Just small misalignments. Places where the inner experience and the outer presentation have drifted apart. You do not need to fix these all at once. You do not need to make some dramatic confession or overhaul your personality. Truthfulness develops gradually, the way light comes into a room when you open the curtains a little at a time. You simply begin to notice. And in noticing, the habit starts to shift. There is a practice you can take from this teaching into ordinary life. It begins with the simplest question. What is true right now? What is actually happening in this moment, in your body, in your mind, in your heart? You can ask this question anytime. In the morning, before the day begins. In the middle of a conversation. In a quiet moment before sleep. It does not require anyone else's involvement. It is between you and yourself. When you ask this question honestly, you may find that the answer is different from the story you were telling. You may discover that you are more tired than you were admitting, or more sad, or more happy, or more confused, or that you have been carrying a feeling you have not named. Something that has been running in the background of your day, influencing everything while remaining unacknowledged. Simply seeing this is the practice. You do not need to do anything about it. You do not need to fix what you find or change it on the spot. The seeing itself is truthfulness in action. In the Buddhist tradition, truthfulness is considered one of the most important of all the practices, the one on which the others depend. This makes sense when you think about it. How can you develop patience if you are not honest about your impatience? How can you cultivate generosity if you cannot see where you are holding back? How can you grow in wisdom if you are not willing to look at what is actually there? What happens over time when you practice this way is subtle but real. You start to notice sooner. The gap between what you feel and what you acknowledge gets shorter. Where it used to take you weeks to realize you were unhappy about something, now it takes days, then hours, then moments. You become quicker at catching yourself mid-story, mid-performance, and returning to what is actually so. In Zen, they sometimes describe this as becoming transparent to yourself. You can see through your own habits of mind. You can watch a story forming and recognize it as a story before it hardens into something you mistake for truth. This does not make life less interesting. If anything, it makes it more so, because you are finally seeing it directly, without the filter. And there is a particular quality that develops in people who practice truthfulness over a long time. They become trustworthy, and not just in the sense that others can rely on them, They become trustworthy to themselves. They know that what they feel, they will acknowledge. What they see, they will not look away from. This is a kind of inner friendship, a loyalty to your own experience that becomes one of the steadiest things in your life. Truth is simply the ground under your feet. It is what is already so, whether you acknowledge it or not. When you turn toward it, you are removing what was in the way. And the ground, once you feel it again, is solid. And from there, everything else becomes possible. Rest here for a moment. Notice what feels true in your body right now. Just what is there. The weight of your limbs, the rhythm of your breath, the temperature of the air on your skin. This is truth. Simple, immediate, requiring nothing. And when you are ready, we will explore the second perfection together. Wisdom, or panna, in the Pali language of the early Buddhist texts, appears on nearly every list the Buddha offered. Nearly every description of what a developed human being looks like includes it. It is that central. And yet wisdom is a word that can feel distant. It conjures images of ancient sages on mountaintops, people who have figured something out that the rest of us have not. It can seem like a destination, a final state that you arrive at after decades of study or practice. But that is not how the Buddhist teachers understood it. They saw wisdom as a way of seeing, something you uncover rather than accumulate, less like filling a room with furniture and more like opening a window and letting in light. We have just explored truthfulness, the willingness to see what is actually here. Wisdom takes that willingness further. Where truthfulness asks what is real, wisdom asks, how much of it can I see? What makes wisdom different from knowledge is this. Knowledge is what you have learned. It is information, concepts, facts, the things you can write down and pass along to someone else. Knowledge is useful. It helps you navigate the world, do your work, make decisions. But knowledge can also become a barrier. When you think you already know what something is, you stop looking at it. When you have a concept for a person, you stop meeting them fresh. When you have decided what life is about, you stop being surprised by what it actually offers. Wisdom is what remains when you hold your knowledge lightly, when you stay curious even in familiar territory, when you are willing to discover that what you thought you knew was incomplete, or slightly off, or simply one angle among many. This is why wisdom is placed near the beginning of our exploration. It is the quality that allows all the others to develop. Without it, patience becomes mere endurance. Without it, generosity becomes mere transaction. Without it, truthfulness becomes mere bluntness. Wisdom is the lens through which each perfection comes into focus. Here is a story that many people know, though its meaning deepens the more you sit with it. A scholar traveled a great distance to visit a teacher who was known for his understanding. The scholar was accomplished. He had studied many traditions, read many books, formed many opinions. He came not so much to learn as to discuss, to match his knowledge against the teacher's and see how they compared. The teacher welcomed him warmly and invited him to sit for tea. As the water boiled and the tea was prepared, the scholar began to talk. He shared his views on the nature of the mind. He described the various schools of thought he had studied. He offered his own theories, refined over years of reading and reflection. The teacher listened quietly, nodding from time to time. When the tea was ready, he began to pour. He filled the scholar's cup to the brim, and then he kept pouring. The tea rose above the rim of the cup. It spilled over onto the table, ran across the surface, and began to drip onto the floor. The scholar watched in confusion, then alarm. "Stop," he said. "The cup is full. No more will go in." The teacher set the pot down and looked at the scholar with kind eyes. "Like this cup," he said, "your mind is already full. Full of opinions, ideas, conclusions. How can I share anything with you when there is no room to receive it?" The scholar was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, he understood. He had traveled all that way to learn, but he had arrived already full. Every space in his mind was occupied by what he already thought he knew. There was no gap, no opening, no place for something new to enter. He had come to a well carrying a bucket that was already overflowing. This is something many of us do. We move through life with a mind that is full of assumptions about how things work, full of opinions about other people, full of ideas about who we are and what we are capable of. And because the mind is full, we tend to encounter life through a filter rather than directly. We see what we expect to see. We hear what we expect to hear. We meet a moment that is entirely new and immediately sort it into categories that are entirely old. A child does not do this. A child encounters the world with a mind that is relatively empty, and so the world lands fresh. A dog is astonishing. A puddle is fascinating. A cardboard box is an adventure. The child has not yet decided what things are, so each thing gets to be itself. As we grow older, the cup fills. This is natural and in many ways necessary. We need categories and concepts to function. We need to know that a stove is hot, that traffic is dangerous, that certain patterns in other people's behavior are worth paying attention to. But somewhere along the way, the filling goes too far. We stop simply using our knowledge and begin to live inside it. We stop looking through the window and start staring at the glass. Wisdom is the practice of emptying the cup, not throwing away everything you know, but holding it lightly, remaining willing to be surprised, staying open to the possibility that this moment, this person, this situation might be different from what you expect. In Zen, they call this Shoshin, or beginner's mind. It is the mind that is open, eager, free of preconceptions. The expert's mind has many possibilities closed off. The beginner's mind has them all still available. This sounds easy. It is one of the hardest things a person can do, because the cup does not feel full from the inside. From the inside, it just feels like the way things are. Here is another story. This one appears in the Buddhist scriptures themselves, and it has been retold across many traditions for centuries. There is an old tale, told in many traditions, about a group of travelers who had never encountered an elephant. They came upon one in the dark, and each reached out to understand what this enormous thing might be. One touched the trunk and said, "This creature is like a thick snake, long, flexible, muscular." Another felt the leg and said, "No, you are wrong. It is like a tree trunk, solid, round, planted firmly on the ground." A third ran her hands along the side and said, "You are both wrong. It is like a wall, broad, flat, immovable." A fourth grasped the tail and said, "None of you are correct. It is like a rope, thin, rough, hanging from above. A fifth touched the ear and said, "It is like a large fan, wide, thin, moving gently." Each one was certain. Each one had direct experience. Each one was telling the truth about what they had touched. And each one was wrong about the whole. They began to argue. Their certainty collided with one another's certainty, and since each was convinced by their own experience, the disagreement became heated. No one could understand how the others could be so mistaken when the evidence was right there in their hands. What none of them considered was that they might each be holding a piece of something larger than any single perspective could contain. The Buddha used this story to illustrate something about how the mind works. We touch one part of reality and mistake it for the whole. We have one experience of a person and decide we know them. We see one aspect of a situation and believe we understand it completely. We arrive at a conclusion and hold it tightly, rarely considering that someone standing in a different place might be touching a different part of the same truth. In Buddhist teaching, this partial seeing is one of the root causes of suffering. We cling to our view as though it were the complete picture, and then we suffer when reality turns out to be larger than what we were holding. Wisdom begins with the recognition that your perspective, however valid, is partial. That your experience, however real, is not the only experience. That the leg is not the elephant. This does not mean that nothing is true or that all opinions are equal. The person touching the trunk is not wrong about what they are touching. The trunk really is there, and it really does feel like that. But they are wrong about thinking their experience is the complete picture. Many of the arguments we find ourselves in follow this pattern. Two people, each touching a different part of the same situation, each certain that their experience tells the whole story. And because neither is willing to consider that the other might also be right, the argument goes nowhere. Two partial truths colliding endlessly. The Buddhist path suggests a different approach. Wisdom is the willingness to ask, what part of the elephant am I touching? What might someone else be feeling that I cannot feel from where I stand? This question does not make you weak. It means adding curiosity to certainty. It means widening the view. Think of someone you know well. A partner, a friend, a family member. Someone you have known for years. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were surprised by them? If it has been a while, that may not be because they have stopped being surprising. It may be because your cup is full. You have formed an idea of who they are, and you now relate to the idea rather than to the person. You know what they will say before they say it. You know how they will react before they react. You have filed them into a category, and the category has become more real to you than the living, changing human being in front of you. What would happen if you emptied the cup? What if you met them tomorrow as though for the first time? Not pretending you do not know them, but allowing for the possibility that there is more to know. That they have changed in ways you have not noticed. That they contain dimensions you have not explored. This is wisdom in relationship. And it is one of the kindest things you can offer another person, the willingness to keep seeing them as they actually are, rather than as the version of them you decided on years ago. The same applies to yourself. You have a story about who you are. It has been forming since childhood, revised over the years, but fundamentally stable. I am this kind of person. I am good at these things and bad at those. I want this, I fear that. The story feels true because you have been living inside it for so long. But is it the whole elephant? Or is it one part, touched in the dark, mistaken for the complete picture? People surprise themselves all the time. They discover capacities they did not know they had. They find courage in situations where they expected to find fear. They respond with gentleness where their story predicted harshness. The human being is larger and more various than any story can contain. Wisdom means holding your story lightly, remaining open to the possibility that you are more than you think, that the person you were yesterday does not have to be the person you are tomorrow, that the cup can be emptied and filled with something fresher. The Buddhist teachers emphasize that wisdom develops in relationship. The Buddha himself said that spiritual friendship, kalyana mitta, is not half the spiritual life, as his attendant once suggested, but the whole of it. By this, he meant that we grow in wisdom through contact with people who can see what we cannot. This matters because the mind is very good at deceiving itself. We have seen this already in our exploration of truthfulness. The stories we tell ourselves feel true precisely because they are ours. We need other perspectives, other eyes, other angles on the elephant to see what we are missing. A good friend, in this sense, is someone who helps you empty your cup by showing you what you have not yet considered, by reflecting back to you what they see, which may be different from what you see in the mirror, by asking the question you have been avoiding. It is about being willing to learn from the people around you, from anyone who can show you a part of the elephant you have not touched. And it is about being that kind of friend in return, offering your own perspective, honestly and kindly, so that others can widen their view too. Wisdom flows in both directions. Wisdom also has to do with the difference between understanding and experiencing. You can understand a great deal about water. You can learn its chemical composition, its boiling point, how it behaves under various conditions. You can study the water cycle, the physics of waves, the role of water in sustaining life. You can become an expert, but none of that knowledge tells you what it feels like to swim, to stand in the rain, to drink a glass of cold water on a hot day, to hear a stream running through a forest. Knowledge about water and the experience of water are different things. Both are valuable, but confusing them is one of the most common mistakes a person can make. This is especially relevant in the territory we are exploring tonight. You can learn a great deal about patience, about generosity, about equanimity. You can read books, listen to talks, form opinions. But until you have actually practiced patience in a moment of frustration, until you have given something away and felt the lightness that follows, until you have sat in the middle of difficulty without fighting it, the knowledge remains abstract. There is a saying in Zen, "Do not mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself." The teachings are the finger. Your life is the moon. This is why the Buddhist teachers insisted that wisdom is itself a practice. You develop it by paying attention, by reflecting on your experience, by asking what is actually happening rather than what should be happening. You develop it by being willing to not know, which is often the beginning of real understanding. As you listen to these words, they are pointing towards something, but they are not the thing itself. The thing itself is your own life, your own experience, your own capacity to see clearly. Tomorrow, or whenever you next encounter a familiar situation, you might try approaching it with an empty cup. See what happens when you let a moment be new. See what you notice when you stop deciding in advance what something means. Wisdom is available right now, to anyone, in the simple willingness to look without deciding, to listen without preparing your response, to encounter what is here rather than what you expected to find. The cup is yours. You can fill it or empty it as you choose. And the world, seen through an empty cup, is a remarkably interesting place. Rest here for a moment. Let your mind soften. You do not need to hold anything right now. Just let the cup be empty for a breath, and then another. When you are ready, we will continue. Equanimity, upekkha in Pali, is one of the most subtle qualities in the Buddhist path and one of the most misunderstood. It appears at the end of several important lists in Buddhist teaching, as though it is the quality that all the others are building toward. There is something that happens to many of us, nearly every day, that we rarely notice. We are pushed and pulled by what is happening around us. Good news lifts us up. Bad news brings us down. A kind word from someone makes the morning bright. A rude one makes the afternoon dark. A plan comes together and we soar. A plan falls apart and we sink. Up, down, pushed by forces outside of us that we did not choose and cannot control. We have grown so used to this that we accept it as normal. Of course, I am happy when good things happen. Of course, I am sad when bad things happen. What other way could it be? Where wisdom, which we explored a moment ago, asks us to see more clearly. Equanimity asks us to stand more steadily in what we see. It is the quality of remaining balanced in the middle of things, right in the center, where everything is happening, but with a steadiness that does not depend on what happens next. Think of the difference between a small boat on the ocean and the ocean floor. The surface is in constant motion. Waves rise and fall. Storms come and go. The small boat is tossed around by every change in the weather. But the ocean floor is still. It does not rise with the waves. It does not sink with the troughs. It simply remains. You are a human being. You live on the surface. Things happen, and you feel them. Equanimity is the discovery that there is a depth to you that the waves do not reach. A place of stillness that is always there, beneath whatever is happening. Here is a story that many people have heard before. It is one of the most well-known stories in the Eastern traditions, and its meaning deepens each time you sit with it. There was a farmer who lived in a small village. He had one horse, which he used to plow his fields, and one son, who helped him with the work. By the standards of the village, he lived a simple life, neither rich nor poor. One morning the gate to his paddock was left open, and the horse ran away. By afternoon, the neighbors had heard the news and came to see him. "What terrible luck," they said. "Your horse is gone. How will you plow your fields? This is a disaster." The farmer listened and nodded. "Maybe," he said. A few days later, the horse returned, and it brought with it 3 wild horses that had followed it home. Now the farmer had 4 horses instead of 1. The neighbors came again, this time with very different faces. "What wonderful luck," they said. "You are a rich man now. 4 horses. This is the best thing that could have happened." The farmer listened and nodded. "Maybe," he said. The following week, the farmer's son was trying to ride one of the wild horses. The horse bucked, The son fell, and his leg broke badly. The neighbors returned, shaking their heads. "What terrible luck," they said. "Your son, your only help, and now he cannot work. This is a real misfortune." "Maybe," said the farmer. The next day, soldiers came through the village, conscripting every young man they could find for a war in a distant province. They took all the able-bodied sons from the village. But when they came to the farmer's house and saw the son with his broken leg, they passed him by. The neighbors came once more. "What incredible luck," they said. You can guess the farmer's reply. The neighbors in this story are caring people. They show up every time something happens. They feel genuine sympathy and genuine happiness on the farmer's behalf. But notice what they are doing. They are labeling every event immediately and completely. This is good. This is bad. This is lucky. This is unlucky. They have decided, within moments, what each event means, and their emotional state shifts accordingly. They are like that small boat on the surface, tossed up by good news and pulled down by bad news, over and over. The farmer does something different. He does not disagree with them. He does not argue that losing his horse was actually a good thing, or that gaining 3 new horses was secretly bad. He simply says, maybe, which is to say, I do not know yet. The story is not finished. I cannot see where this leads. And he is right. Every single time he is right. The event that looked like disaster turned into good fortune. The event that looked like good fortune turned into hardship. And if the story continued, the hardship would likely turn into something else again. In Buddhism, there is a teaching about what are called the 8 worldly winds: gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. The Buddha observed that these winds blow through every human life and that most people are helplessly pushed around by them. When gain comes, they are elated. When loss comes, they are crushed. They spend their lives at the mercy of conditions they cannot control. The farmer has found a way to stand in the wind without being knocked over. He still feels the wind. He still cares about his horse, his son, his life. But he has stopped letting the wind decide how he stands. Equanimity is the willingness to stay in the maybe. You still care. You still have preferences. But you have seen, through your own experience, that your initial judgment about what is happening is unreliable. The small boat is rarely a good judge of the ocean. The Buddhist teachers had a beautiful image for the quality we are exploring. Imagine you take a handful of salt and drop it into a small cup of water. You stir it in. Then you taste the water. It is undrinkable, harsh, bitter, overwhelmingly salty. Now imagine you take the same handful of salt and drop it into a wide, clear river. The salt dissolves. The river keeps flowing. You cup your hands and drink from the river. What does it taste like? It tastes like water. The salt is there, technically, the same amount of salt, but the river is so vast that the salt makes no discernible difference. The salt is whatever difficult thing is happening. The pain, the loss, the disappointment, the frustration. It is real. It has not been denied or removed. The same amount of salt went into the river as went into the cup. The difference is the size of the vessel that receives it. When we are contracted, tight, small in our awareness, difficulty overwhelms us. A harsh word ruins the day. A setback feels like the end. A disappointment becomes the only thing we can see or think about. The cup is small, and the salt is all we can taste. But when we are wide, open, spacious in our awareness, the same difficulty can be held without overwhelming us. The harsh word is there, but it is not the only thing. The setback is there, but it takes its place alongside everything else that is happening. The disappointment is real, but it does not define the day. Equanimity is the practice of becoming the river rather than the cup. Consider a day that starts badly. You wake up tired. Something goes wrong early, maybe a spilled cup of coffee, a frustrating message, a disruption to your plans. And because the cup is small, because your awareness is narrow and fixed on what went wrong, the salt takes over. The mood sets in. The whole day is colored by that early difficulty, and every subsequent annoyance confirms the flavor. This is a bad day. But what if, in that moment, instead of contracting around the difficulty, you widened? What if, instead of letting the spilled coffee be the only thing, you also noticed the light coming through the window? The fact that your body is breathing, the sound of birds, or traffic, or whatever is outside your door. The 100 other things that are also happening in this moment, most of which are not bad at all. The coffee is still spilled. Nothing about the situation has changed. But you are no longer a small cup. You are a river. And the salt, while present, is not the whole story. This is a practice you can do in real time, in the middle of a day that is going sideways. You do not need to sit down and meditate. You do not need to recite anything. You simply widen. You let more of the moment in. You are simply widening your awareness so that difficulty takes its proper place, which is one part of a much larger picture. Most of us have had the experience of looking back on a terrible week, months or years later, and seeing it differently. The thing that felt so devastating at the time turned out to be a turning point. The loss led somewhere unexpected. The failure taught something essential. From a distance, the picture was wider, and the salt was not so strong. Equanimity is the practice of accessing that wider view while it is happening, not only in retrospect. It is the practice of standing in the middle of the storm and remembering that you are larger than any single thing that is happening to you. There is another story from the Zen tradition that takes this teaching further. The farmer's maybe is tested by shifts in fortune, but the Zen master Hakuin was tested by something harder, the loss of his good name. Hakuin was a respected teacher who lived a quiet, disciplined life. Near his home, there lived a young woman whose parents discovered she was expecting a child. When they demanded to know who the father was, the girl, frightened and unwilling to reveal the truth, named Hakuin. The parents were furious. They went to Hakuin and confronted him with the accusation. His reputation, built over years of sincere practice, was destroyed in a single conversation. Hakuin's response was 3 words, "Is that so?" When the child was born, the parents brought it to Hakuin and left it with him. He had lost his standing in the community. Students stopped coming. Neighbors who had once respected him now looked at him with contempt. And he said nothing in his own defense. He simply cared for the child. He fed it, held it, kept it warm. He did what needed to be done. A year passed. Then the young woman, unable to bear the weight of her lie any longer, told her parents the truth. The real father was a young man from the village. The parents were overcome with shame. They went to Hakuin, bowed deeply, apologized, and asked for the child back. Hakuin looked at them. "Is that so?" he said. And he handed the child over. The same 3 words. When he was falsely accused, "Is that so?" When he was vindicated, "Is that so?" When the child was given to him, when the child was taken away. The same quiet response. This is equanimity under pressure that most of us would find unbearable. Hakuin did not fight. He did not explain. He did not collapse. And when his name was restored, he did not celebrate or demand an apology. He simply continued. What allowed him to do this was not coldness. It was depth. He had a center that did not depend on what other people thought of him. His peace was his own. It could be tested, but it could not be taken, because it did not come from outside. People sometimes worry that equanimity means not caring, that if you stop reacting so strongly to events, you will become flat, detached, unable to feel joy or sorrow, a kind of pleasant numbness where nothing really matters. But look at the farmer again. He did not stop caring about his son. When the boy fell and broke his leg, the farmer surely felt concern. He likely helped him, tended to him, stayed by his side. He did not say maybe to avoid feeling anything. He said maybe because he understood that his feelings about the event and the meaning of the event were 2 different things. The Buddhist teachers were careful to distinguish equanimity from indifference. Indifference is a closing down, a withdrawal from life. Equanimity is the opposite. It is a widening. You feel more because you are not bracing against what you feel. You can love fiercely and still maintain perspective. You can care about outcomes and still release your certainty about what those outcomes mean. In fact, equanimity often allows you to care more effectively. When you are not being tossed by every wave, you can see more clearly what is actually needed. When you are not consumed by your reaction to events, you have energy available to respond to them. Equanimity is balance within feeling, the steady ground beneath the shifting weather of emotional life. Over time, equanimity develops something you can feel, a quality of no longer being pushed around by life. Many of us are, to a surprising degree, at the mercy of whatever happens. Our inner state depends on outer conditions. We are happy when things go well, and miserable when they do not. We are kind when we feel good, and short-tempered when we feel bad. Our behavior, our mood, our very identity seems to shift with circumstances. This is exhausting. And it means that our peace is always conditional. It depends on the world cooperating with our preferences, which the world is under no obligation to do. The Buddha called this kind of conditional peace worldly happiness, and he distinguished it from a deeper kind of peace that does not depend on conditions. Equanimity is the doorway to that deeper peace. It does not guarantee that you will never feel unhappy, but it develops a center, a place of gravity that remains steady regardless of what is happening around you. Events still affect you, but they do not define you. You feel the waves, but you are also the depth. This quality is noticeable in people who have developed it. They do not seem easily rattled. They meet good fortune without losing themselves in it, and bad fortune without being crushed by it. There is a steadiness about them, a kind of flexible strength, like a tree that bends in the wind but does not break. Its roots go deep enough that the surface movement does not threaten its standing. You have probably met people like this. They are remarkably easy to be around. Their problems do not spill over onto everyone else. They hold what is happening without dropping it on you. And in their presence, you find that your own waves calm down a little. Their steadiness is contagious. This is one of the gifts of equanimity. It benefits not only the person who has developed it, but everyone around them. How does one cultivate this quality in daily life? It might begin with something very simple. When you notice yourself being pushed, pause. Just for a moment. Just long enough to recognize what is happening. Something good has occurred, and you feel yourself being pulled upward. Pause. Notice the pull. Feel the excitement, the elation, the urge to declare that everything is wonderful. You do not have to suppress it. Simply notice it. And then ask, is this the whole story? Or am I standing in the middle of something I cannot yet see the end of? Something difficult has occurred, and you feel yourself being pulled downward. Pause. Notice the pull. Feel the weight, the contraction, the urge to declare that everything is terrible. You do not have to deny it. Simply notice it. And then ask the same question, is this the whole story? Maybe is the practice. Less a word you say out loud than an inner orientation. A willingness to wait. A willingness to let events unfold before deciding what they mean. Over time, this pause becomes more natural. It does not take long. A few seconds, often, is enough. The knee-jerk labeling, this is good, this is bad, begins to slow down. You develop a little more space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, equanimity lives. You become free. Free to feel without being controlled by feeling. Free to respond rather than react. Free to stand in the middle of a life that is constantly changing and find, within yourself, something that does not need to change at all. The farmer in the story was not a special person. He was a man who had seen enough of life to know that the story is never finished. That every event is a chapter, not a conclusion. That maybe is almost always the most honest thing you can say. And in that honesty, he found peace. He had simply stopped demanding that life be anything other than what it was. Hakuin found the same thing, in a harder way. He let his reputation be taken and returned without grasping at either. Both men discovered something the Buddhist teachings point to again and again, that the deepest peace is the one that does not depend on conditions. It is yours, whether the horse comes home or runs away, whether the neighbors praise you or condemn you, whether the day goes as planned or falls apart entirely. This peace is not something you have to build from scratch. It is already there, the way the ocean floor is already there beneath the waves. Equanimity is simply the practice of remembering where it is and resting there, even while the surface continues to move. Rest here for a moment. Notice the weather of your mind right now. Whatever it is, let it be. You do not need to change it. You do not need to label it as good or bad. Simply notice. Simply rest. Simply be the river. And when you are ready, we will explore the fourth perfection together. Resolve, aditthana in Pali, is sometimes translated as determination, sometimes as commitment, sometimes simply as the decision to stay with something until it is done. The Buddhist path is a long one. The tradition does not hide this. It describes a process that unfolds over years, over decades, over what the tradition sometimes calls lifetimes. There are no shortcuts and no ways to skip the middle part. And so the path needs something to sustain it, something that keeps a person going when the initial inspiration has faded and the work has become ordinary. That something is resolve, where equanimity, which we just explored, teaches us to stand steady in the middle of changing conditions. Resolve gives that steadiness a direction. It is the compass that keeps pointing the same way, even when the wind shifts, even when you are tired, even when the thing you committed to has become difficult, or boring, or slower than you hoped. Resolve bridges the gap between inspiration and completion. It is the force that keeps you going after the excitement has burned away, when all that remains is the work itself and the reason you began. Many of us begin things well. We feel the initial surge of enthusiasm, the excitement of a new project, a new practice, a new way of living. But somewhere along the way, the enthusiasm fades. The novelty wears off. What was once fresh becomes routine, and what was once exciting becomes effortful. And so we stop. We move on to the next thing, carrying the same pattern with us. The most famous act of resolve in the Buddhist tradition is the one that started everything. Before the Buddha was the Buddha, he was a man who had spent years searching. He had studied with the best teachers of his time. He had practiced extreme disciplines, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He had tried many paths, followed many methods, given everything he had. And still he had not found what he was looking for. One evening, he sat down beneath a large fig tree near a river in northern India. The tradition says he gathered grass for a cushion and arranged himself beneath the branches. And he made a vow. He said, in essence, "I will not get up from this spot until I have seen through to the truth of things." He sat through the night, and according to the tradition, everything that could disturb him came. His doubts arrived. His fears arrived. His desires arrived. His memories, his regrets, his fantasies about the future. Everything the mind could produce, it produced. The tradition describes these disturbances as visitations. Temptations came, offering him pleasure, comfort, a return to his former life of ease. Threats came, trying to shake him with visions of danger and failure. Doubts came, the cruelest of all, whispering that the whole effort was pointless, that he was fooling himself, that he should give up and go home. And he sat with all of it. He did not fight it. He did not run from it. He simply stayed. Each time something arose to pull him away, he let it arise, let it present itself fully, and let it pass. He returned, again and again, to the simple act of sitting, of being present, of remaining. By morning, something had shifted. He saw clearly. The search was over. There are many ways to understand this story, and the tradition has explored them for thousands of years. But for our exploration tonight, notice the resolve. He did not know, when he sat down, that this would be the night. He had no guarantee. He had failed before, many times. What he had was a decision. I will stay with this. Whatever comes, I will not leave. That decision was enough. And notice what the decision did not include. It did not include a plan. It did not include a strategy for dealing with what arose. It did not include conditions or escape routes or backup options. It was simply a commitment to stay present, and then the willingness to honor that commitment moment by moment through the night. In the Buddhist tradition, this kind of resolve is understood as one of the most powerful forces a human being can generate. It is the moment when scattered energy becomes focused, when the many directions the mind usually pulls toward are gathered into a single point. Like sunlight passing through a lens, ordinary attention becomes something capable of burning through what seemed impenetrable. This is what the tradition means when it speaks of adhitthana as a perfection. It perfects everything it touches, because it provides the sustained attention that all other growth requires. A teaching circulates in many forms, sometimes attributed to a stonecutter, sometimes to a sculptor. It goes something like this. A man strikes a stone with his chisel. Nothing happens. He strikes it again. Nothing. He strikes it a third time, a fourth, a 10th, a 20th. The stone shows no sign of breaking. No crack, no movement, no indication that anything is happening at all. He strikes it the 100th time, and the stone splits in two. It was not the 100th blow that broke the stone. It was all of them. Every strike that seemed to accomplish nothing was, in fact, changing the stone from the inside. The fractures were forming beneath the surface, invisible, accumulating quietly. The stone was being prepared for the moment of breaking long before that moment arrived. This is how resolve works. The results are rarely visible in the moment. You sit to meditate, and nothing seems to happen. You practice patience, and you still lose your temper. You try to be more generous, and you notice how tight you still are. It can feel as though you are striking a stone that will never break. But something is happening. The Buddhist teachers understood this. They spoke of practice as a gradual process, like the wearing of water on rock. The changes accumulate below the surface, in ways you cannot see and cannot measure, until one day something shifts and you realize you are different from how you were. You are kinder than you used to be. You are steadier. You react less. You see more clearly. None of this happened suddenly. It happened one strike at a time, over days and weeks and months. And what kept you striking, when there was no visible result, was resolve. The willingness to trust the process even when the process has not yet shown you anything. In daily life, resolve shows up in ways that may not look dramatic. It shows up in the decision to keep going when the initial energy has faded. You decide to pay more attention to your breath throughout the day, to notice when your mind drifts into worry or planning, and to come back to what is actually happening. The first few days feel fresh. You catch yourself drifting, you return, and there is a satisfaction in that. But by the second week, you have forgotten more often than you have remembered. The practice feels flat. The novelty is gone, and what remains is just the work of noticing, again and again, without any special feeling attached to it. This is where resolve lives. In the moment when inspiration has left, and all that remains is the choice, do I continue or do I stop? The Buddhist tradition has a specific understanding of this moment. It recognizes that effort, which we will explore later, provides the energy to practice. But resolve provides the direction. Without energy, you cannot move. Without resolve, you do not know where you are going. You need both, but resolve is the one that decides. The same pattern appears in relationships, in creative work, in learning a new skill, in any long-term commitment. There is always a point where the excitement fades and the real work begins. The Buddhist path does not pretend this point does not exist. It names it, acknowledges it, and offers resolve as the quality that carries you through. There is a quality to resolve that can be misunderstood. It can sound like gritting your teeth, like forcing yourself through difficulty by sheer willpower. But in the Buddhist understanding, resolve is closer to a vow than to a clenched jaw. Think of the difference between gripping something tightly and simply not letting go. The grip is tense, effortful, exhausting. The not letting go can be soft. It can be patient. It can be as simple as showing up again tomorrow. The Buddha did not fight his way through the night under the tree. He sat. He stayed. He let everything come, and he let everything go. His resolve was a decision to remain present, no matter what arose. One of the most practical expressions of resolve in the Buddhist tradition is the practice of taking a vow at the beginning of a period of practice. Before you sit, before you begin, you decide, I will stay with this. Whatever happens, I will not get up until the time is finished. I will not check my phone. I will not follow the impulse to leave. This sounds small. 20 minutes perhaps. 30. It is not a night under a tree, and yet it contains the same essential quality. You are making a commitment to yourself and then honoring it. You are saying, with your body and your attention, this is what I am doing right now. Everything else can wait. There is a reason the Buddhist tradition places so much emphasis on this small act. It is because resolve, like all the perfections, develops through repetition. Each time you make a small commitment and keep it, you build the capacity for larger ones. Each time you sit through the restlessness, through the boredom, through the voice that says you have better things to do, you are training something in yourself that cannot be trained any other way. The Zen teacher Dogen wrote that to study the way is to study the self. And one of the things you learn about yourself through the practice of resolve is how often you abandon things. How quickly you move on when something becomes uncomfortable. How easily the mind finds reasons to stop. Seeing this clearly, without judgment, is itself a form of progress. You begin to recognize the moment of abandonment as it happens, and in that recognition, you gain the freedom to choose differently. You can say, I see you, impulse to leave, and I am staying anyway. Over time, this small practice of resolve builds something larger. Each time you stay when you wanted to leave, you strengthen the capacity to stay. Each time you return to the breath after your mind has wandered, you are making a choice, and the accumulation of those choices becomes a quality of character. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said that the most important thing is to keep your practice going. He did not say the most important thing is to have a breakthrough, or to reach a certain state, or to understand a particular teaching. Just keep going. This is resolve in its simplest form. There is something freeing about this. It takes the pressure off. You do not have to be brilliant. You do not have to have the perfect session, the perfect insight, the perfect day. You just have to continue. And in the continuing, something grows that is stronger and more reliable than any single experience. The Buddhist tradition sometimes compares resolve to the current of a river. The surface of the river changes constantly. Leaves float by, the light shifts, the water eddies and swirls. But beneath the surface, The current keeps moving in the same direction. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to be dramatic. It simply carries everything forward, steadily, over time. This is the kind of resolve that sustains a life of practice. It does not make speeches. It simply shows up, again and again, and does the work. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition that captures this. A student asked his teacher how long it would take to reach understanding. The teacher said, "A long time." The student asked, "What if I work very hard?" The teacher said, "Then even longer." The student was confused. The teacher explained, "When you are focused on the destination, you are not present for the journey. And it is the journey, step by step, breath by breath, that does the work." Resolve, in this understanding, is the willingness to take the journey without needing to know when it ends. To walk because walking is what you are doing. To practice because practice is your life and not merely a preparation for some other, better life. The Buddha sat down under that tree without knowing what the night would bring. What he brought was his willingness to stay. And that was everything. In your own life, you might notice where this quality could serve you. Not as a rigid demand that you never waver, but as a gentle return. You drift and you come back. You forget and you remember. You stop and you begin again. Resolve is not about never falling. It is about always getting up. The stone does not care how many times you pause between strikes. It only cares that you keep striking. And each strike, however small, is the whole practice. And over time, something in you begins to change. You notice that you trust yourself more. You know that when you say you will do something, you will do it. When you commit to a direction, you will hold it. This inner trustworthiness, this reliability to yourself, is one of the deepest gifts of resolve. It becomes a kind of home you carry with you, a place of steadiness that does not depend on anything outside. The Buddhist tradition teaches that resolve is one of the qualities that carries a person all the way to awakening. It is the perfection that holds the other perfections together. Patience, generosity, wisdom, loving kindness, all of them require time to develop, and resolve is what provides that time. It is the container in which everything else grows. It asks nothing spectacular of you. It simply asks that you continue, one day at a time, one breath at a time, one small act of commitment followed by another, until the path and the walker become the same thing. Rest here for a moment. Feel whatever you are feeling. You do not need to do anything with it. Simply rest in the knowledge that the next step, whenever it comes, is enough. One more breath. One more moment of attention. The stone is already changing. We will continue when you are ready. In Pali, the word for patience is khanti, and it means something broader than what we usually think of when we hear the word. In English, patience often sounds like waiting. Waiting for the bus. Waiting for the line to move. Waiting for something to be over. Khanti means something closer to forbearance. The capacity to be with what is difficult without being broken by it. The ability to endure, and to do so with an open heart rather than clenched teeth. To remain present for experiences you did not choose and would not have chosen, and to come through them whole. If resolve, which we just explored, is the decision to stay, patience is the quality that allows the staying to be bearable. Resolve says, I will not leave. Patience says, I can be here. They work together, and one without the other tends to harden into something brittle. Many of us are patient with certain things and impatient with others. We can wait an hour for a meal at a good restaurant but lose our composure when someone is slow to reply to a message. We can spend months on a project at work but grow frustrated with ourselves after a single difficult meditation. Our patience has gaps in it, and life has a way of finding them. The Buddhist teaching on patience is that these gaps can be mended. Patience is a quality that can be cultivated gradually, the way any strength develops, through practice and repetition. And like all the perfections, it begins small. You do not need to become endlessly patient overnight. You simply need to become a little more patient today than you were yesterday. In a world that moves quickly, where answers are expected instantly and results are measured in days, patience can feel like a forgotten quality. But the Buddhist tradition places it near the center of the path, because without it, the path itself becomes a source of frustration. You cannot rush awakening. You cannot hurry the heart. And the attempt to do so only creates more of the suffering the path is designed to relieve. In the Buddhist scriptures, a man came to the Buddha one day in a state of great agitation. He was angry. Something had been done to him, or said about him, and he had come looking for someone to bear the brunt of it. Finding the Buddha sitting calmly with his students in a grove of trees, the man began to shout. He hurled insults. He said terrible things, one after another, with real force behind them. He questioned the Buddha's character, his teaching, his right to sit there looking so peaceful when the world was full of injustice. The students tensed. Some of them looked uncomfortable. A few seemed on the verge of intervening. But the Buddha sat quietly through all of it, his expression unchanged, his breathing steady. He looked at the man the way you might look at a storm, with attention but without alarm. When the man had exhausted himself and fallen silent, breathing hard, the Buddha spoke. If someone offers you a gift, he said, and you do not accept it, who does the gift belong to? The man, caught off guard by the question, paused. It would still belong to the person who offered it, he said. That is right, the Buddha replied. And in the same way, I do not accept what you have offered me today. Your anger remains yours. Your insults remain yours. I have not taken them. The man stood there for a moment, uncertain. Something in the Buddha's calm had unsettled him more than any argument could have. He had come looking for a fight, and there was no one to fight with. His anger, which had felt so solid and justified, suddenly had nowhere to land. He bowed, and he left. This story is often told as a lesson about anger, and it is. But for our exploration of patience, the deeper teaching is in the Buddha's composure. He did not react. He did not defend himself. He did not become angry in return, which is what most of us would do almost automatically. Someone shouts at us, and something in us rises to meet it. The reaction is instant, older than thought, wired into the body. The Buddha's patience was not the suppression of that reaction. He was not holding down anger and pretending to be calm. According to the teaching, there was genuinely nothing to suppress. The insults landed on something so spacious that they made no mark, the way a stone thrown into a wide lake barely disturbs the surface. This connects directly to the equanimity we explored earlier. The spaciousness of the river, the width of the lake, the depth of the ocean floor. Patience lives in that same wide space. When you are contracted and small, every insult stings, every delay frustrates, every discomfort feels unbearable. When you are wide, these things still happen, but they are received differently. In the Buddhist understanding, patience is the quality that allows difficulty to pass through you rather than getting stuck. The angry man's words entered the space around the Buddha and dissolved. They did not accumulate. They did not leave residue. They came and they went, and the Buddha remained as he was. This does not mean the Buddha felt nothing. The teaching is subtler than that. He was fully present for what was happening. He heard every word. He saw the man's pain, his confusion, his need to strike at something. But he received it the way the earth receives rain. The rain falls, and the earth absorbs it. The earth does not argue with the rain. It does not throw it back. It simply takes it in, and life grows from the contact. There is something useful in this image. Patience is often thought of as something hard, something that requires effort and strain. But the earth does not strain to receive rain. It is simply wide enough and deep enough that the rain is held without difficulty. There is another image of patience that comes from the natural world, and Buddhist teachers have used it for centuries. Consider the bamboo plant. For the first several years of its life, a bamboo shoot shows almost no growth above ground. You plant it, you water it, you tend it, and you see nothing. A season passes, then another. The shoot barely rises above the soil. If you did not know what you were growing, you might give up. You might conclude that something was wrong, that the plant had failed, that your effort was wasted. But beneath the surface, something enormous is happening. The bamboo is building a root system, a vast, intricate network of roots spreading outward and downward, anchoring itself, preparing for what is to come. Then, in a single season, it grows. Some species can grow several feet in a matter of weeks. The visible growth seems sudden, almost miraculous. But it was years in the making. The roots were the work. The visible growth was the result. Patience is the willingness to tend something you cannot yet see, to water the ground and trust that something is forming beneath the surface, even when there is no visible evidence. In Buddhist practice, this is sometimes called the long-enduring mind. It is the understanding that meaningful change rarely happens on the schedule we would prefer. Many people come to meditation or to spiritual practice expecting quick results. They sit for a week and wonder why they are not calmer. They practice loving kindness for a month and notice they are still irritable with their family. They read the teachings, understand them intellectually, and grow frustrated when the understanding does not translate immediately into a different way of living. The bamboo is building its roots. The stone is being struck. The process is happening, even when you cannot see it. The Buddha spoke of practice as something that unfolds over a long time. They did not promise quick transformation. What they promised was that the work is never wasted. Every moment of genuine attention, every act of kindness, every breath taken with awareness, these are roots going down into the dark soil. You may not see the results for a long time, but they are there, and when the growth finally becomes visible, it will draw on everything you have accumulated. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from accepting this. When you stop demanding that the bamboo grow on your schedule, you can actually enjoy the watering. The practice becomes its own reward, rather than a means to an end. You sit to meditate because sitting is what you are doing, and that is enough. The results will come when they come. In daily life, patience shows up most clearly in the moments we would rather skip. The conversation that is going nowhere. The recovery that is taking longer than expected. The relationship that requires more of us than we thought we had to give. The line that is not moving. The traffic that is not clearing. The body that is not cooperating. These moments are not interruptions to your life. In the Buddhist understanding, they are your life. The tradition sometimes calls them the practice ground, because patience cannot be developed in comfortable circumstances. You can only develop patience when something is testing it. The test is the training. This is a useful reframe. Instead of seeing difficult moments as interruptions to your life, you might begin to see them as the curriculum. Instead of seeing difficult moments as interruptions to your life, you might begin to see them as the curriculum. The traffic jam, the difficult colleague, the sleepless night with a restless child. Each of these is an opportunity to practice khanti, to be with what is difficult without being broken by it. And the practice is not dramatic. It is as simple as this. You notice the impulse to react, and you pause. You feel the impatience rising in your body, the tightness in the chest, the narrowing of attention, the urge to push the difficulty away. And instead of acting on that impulse, you stay. You breathe. You let the feeling be there without letting it drive you. Over time, something shifts. The gap between the difficulty and your reaction to it grows a little wider. You find that you can hold more than you thought you could. The container gets bigger. The things that used to feel unbearable become simply unpleasant, and the things that used to feel unpleasant become simply part of the day. This is patience growing, beneath the surface, like roots. And here is something the Buddhist teachers noticed. Patience, once it begins to develop, has a way of changing how you experience time itself. When you are impatient, time feels like an enemy. It is moving too slowly, or too quickly, or in the wrong direction. You are always fighting it, always wishing you were somewhere else in the timeline of your life. When patience develops, time becomes neutral. It is simply the medium in which things unfold. You stop fighting it and begin to move with it, the way a leaf moves with a stream. The urgency that colored everything begins to soften. The sense that something needs to happen right now, that you cannot bear another moment of waiting, that life is passing you by, these feelings lose their grip. What replaces them is something surprisingly pleasant. A willingness to be here, in this moment, at this pace, with things as they are. The Buddhist teachers sometimes called this santutti, or contentment, and they saw it as one of the natural fruits of patience. You did not have to chase contentment. You simply had to stop rushing, and contentment was what remained. There is one more dimension of patience that the Buddhist teachings emphasize, and it may be the most important one. It is patience with yourself. Many people who are drawn to spiritual practice are hard on themselves. They set high standards. They notice their failings with sharp clarity. They can be patient with others but ruthless with their own shortcomings. The Buddhist path asks for something different. It asks you to bring the same patience to your own stumbling that you would bring to a child learning to walk. The child falls. Of course, the child falls. That is part of walking. You do not scold the child for falling. You help them up, and you wait for them to try again. You are learning something. you will fall. The old patterns will reassert themselves. The impatience will return. The reactivity will flare up again, just when you thought you had moved past it. This is not failure. This is the bamboo building roots. In the Buddhist teachings, there is a recognition that the path itself is long. The perfections are called perfections because they take time to ripen. They do not arrive fully formed. They grow gradually through seasons of effort and seasons of rest, through periods of clarity and periods of confusion. The tradition never asks you to be perfect now. It asks you to be patient with the process of becoming. And there is something beautiful in this. When you stop demanding immediate transformation, you can settle into the pace of your own growth. You can let the bamboo be bamboo. You can let the roots do their work in the dark. You can trust that the visible growth will come when the foundation is ready, and that rushing it will not help. Patience with yourself is one of the kindest things you can practice. And in the Buddhist tradition, it is understood as essential to the path. Without it, practice becomes another form of pressure, another demand that you be different from how you are. With it, practice becomes an ongoing invitation to grow at whatever pace is natural for you. Over a lifetime of practice, patience becomes something you carry lightly. It stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like space. The space to let things unfold. The space to let people be who they are. The space to let yourself be where you are, without the constant pressure to be further along. In Buddhism, this spacious patience is considered one of the marks of a mature practitioner, someone whose practice has seeped into the way they hold everything, with time, with trust. Rest here for a moment. Let whatever is stirring in you settle at its own pace. There is nowhere to be, nothing to rush toward. The roots are growing, even now, in the dark beneath the surface. And when you are ready, we will explore the sixth perfection together. The Pali word metta comes from the same root as the word for friend. To practice metta is to practice friendliness toward others and toward yourself. Of all the perfections, this one may feel the most immediately accessible. Kindness is something most people understand intuitively. You do not need to study it. You have felt it, received it, offered it. You know what it is like to be met with warmth, and you know what it is like to be met with coldness. The difference between them is unmistakable. And yet metta, as the Buddhist teachers understood it, goes deeper than ordinary niceness. It is not a social grace. It is not about being pleasant or agreeable. It is a quality of the heart that, when fully developed, extends in every direction, without exception, without condition. It includes the people you love, the people you struggle with, the people you have never met, and, perhaps most challengingly, yourself. If patience, which we just explored, is the ability to remain present for difficulty, loving kindness is what fills that presence with warmth. Without patience, you cannot stay. Without loving kindness, the staying becomes cold. The origin of the metta teaching in the Buddhist tradition is itself a story about fear. A group of monks had been sent by the Buddha into a forest to meditate during the rainy season. The forest was dense and remote, and the monks planned to spend 3 months there in silence and practice. They found a suitable clearing, settled in, and began. But the forest was already inhabited. According to the tradition, the spirits who lived among the trees were unhappy with the monks' arrival. They had been displaced from their homes in the branches and roots, and they wanted the monks gone. So the spirits began to make things difficult. Odd sounds drifted through the trees at night. The monks felt uneasy, watched, unwelcome. Sleep became hard to find. Concentration slipped away. The forest, which should have been a place of practice, felt inhospitable. After a short time, the monks gave up. They left the forest and returned to the Buddha, shaken and embarrassed, and told him what had happened. The Buddha listened, and then he did something unexpected. He did not send them to a different forest. He did not give them a technique for overcoming fear. He did not tell them to be braver. He taught them the Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness. And he told them to go back to the same forest, carrying this teaching as their only protection. The monks returned. This time, instead of struggling against the fear, they practiced metta. They sat among the trees and radiated friendliness toward the spirits, toward the forest, toward the darkness itself. They wished well-being to whatever was there, seen or unseen. And something shifted. The spirits, according to the story, were moved by the warmth directed toward them. The hostility dissolved. The forest became peaceful. The monks completed their retreat without further difficulty. There are many ways to hear this story. You might take it literally, as a tale of monks and tree spirits. You might take it as a metaphor for what happens when we meet hostility with warmth rather than resistance. Either way, the teaching at the center of it is striking. The Buddha's prescription for fear was not strength. It was kindness. The monks did not need to become tougher. They needed to become warmer. In the Buddhist understanding, metta works this way because hostility feeds on resistance. When you push against something, you give it something to push back against. The dynamic escalates. But when you meet hostility with genuine goodwill, there is nothing for it to grip. The aggression has nowhere to land, and it tends to dissolve. This is similar to what we saw in the patience teaching, where the Buddha did not accept the angry man's insults. But metta goes a step further. It does not merely decline to engage. It actively offers something. It responds to coldness with warmth, to fear with friendliness, to hostility with care. The monks did not simply endure the spirits. They loved them. And that love changed the situation in a way that endurance alone could not. There is a practical insight buried in this story that extends well beyond forests and spirits. Many of the difficult situations we face have a quality of hostility to them. A conflict at work, a tension in the family, a neighborhood dispute, an inner struggle with a part of ourselves we do not like. In each case, our instinct is often to resist, to push back, to meet force with force. The metta teaching suggests a different approach. What if you met the difficulty with warmth? What if, instead of bracing, you softened? This does not mean surrendering or agreeing. It means changing the quality of your presence from defensive to open. And in the Buddhist experience, this change of quality often shifts the entire dynamic because you have changed the terms of the encounter. There is another story from the Zen tradition that shows what happens when metta is absent. An old woman in China had been supporting a monk for over 20 years. She built him a small hut. She brought him food every day. She made sure he had what he needed so he could devote himself fully to practice. After all those years, she grew curious. Had her investment borne fruit? Had this monk, sitting in the hut she had built and eating the food she provided, actually developed anything of value? So she devised a small test. She asked a young woman from the village to visit the monk, to sit close to him, to put her arms around him, and then to ask, "How does it feel to be held like this?" The young woman did as she was asked. She went to the hut, sat beside the monk, embraced him, and asked the question. The monk replied in a voice as flat as a winter field, "An old tree grows on a cold rock in winter. Nowhere is there any warmth." The young woman returned and reported what the monk had said. The old woman listened. Then her face changed. "To think I fed that fellow for 20 years, she said. "He showed no warmth, no consideration, no human feeling at all. He did not have to respond to passion, but he could have shown some compassion. He could have recognized the person in front of him." The next morning, she went to the hut and told the monk to leave. She had built it for him. She had fed him for 20 years. And now she was taking it back, because his practice had produced everything except the one thing that mattered most. This story can feel surprising. The monk seems to have done everything right. He was disciplined. He was unmoved. He had clearly developed concentration and detachment. But in the Buddhist understanding, that is not enough. A practice that produces coldness has missed something essential. The old woman understood this better than the monk did. She was not asking him to break his vows. She was asking him to be human, to meet another person with some quality of warmth, of recognition, of care. Metta is what was missing. The monk had discipline but no heart. He had achieved stillness but not warmth. In the Buddhist tradition, these two must go together. A mind that is clear but cold is only half awake. This is why metta appears on the list of perfections. It is the quality that keeps the other perfections from becoming dry. Patience without metta becomes stoicism. Resolve without metta becomes rigidity. Wisdom without metta becomes detachment. Metta is the warmth that runs through all of them, giving them life. The Metta Sutta itself contains an image that many people find deeply moving. It describes the quality of loving kindness by comparing it to the feeling a mother has toward her only child. That fierce, unconditional protectiveness, that willingness to give everything for the well-being of another. The sutta then says, in the same way, cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings. This is an extraordinary instruction. It asks you to extend the most powerful love you can imagine, the love of a parent for their child, in every direction, toward every living thing. It does not say, extend it toward the people who deserve it, or the people who are kind to you, or the people who belong to your group. It says all beings. In practice, of course, this is the work of a lifetime. Very few of us can honestly say we feel the same warmth toward a stranger as we do toward our own child. But the teaching is pointing toward a capacity that is already present in the heart. If you can feel that depth of love for one person, the capacity is there. The practice of metta is the gradual widening of that capacity, like slowly opening a door that was only cracked. And the Buddhist tradition is practical about how this widening happens. It does not ask you to force yourself to love everyone equally overnight. It gives you a method, a sequence, a way to work with the heart over time. In the Buddhist tradition, metta practice often takes a specific form. You sit and bring to mind different categories of people. one at a time. You might begin with yourself, then someone you care about, then someone neutral, someone you pass on the street and barely notice, then someone difficult, someone you struggle with, and finally, all beings everywhere. For each one you offer a simple wish. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. The words matter less than the feeling behind them. Some people use these phrases. Others use different ones. Some use no words at all, simply holding the person in mind with a quality of warmth. The form is flexible. What matters is the direction of the heart. Many people find that certain categories are easy and others are hard. Wishing well-being to someone you love is natural. Wishing well-being to yourself can be surprisingly difficult. And wishing well-being to someone who has hurt you can feel nearly impossible. The Buddhist teachers would say, that is where the practice is. The easy parts are pleasant, and they warm the heart. But the harder parts are where the growth happens. Each time you extend metta towards someone you struggle with, you widen the circle a little. Each time you offer it to yourself despite the inner critic's objections, you heal something. The practice is not about achieving perfect universal love. It is about moving in that direction, one person at a time, one breath at a time. In daily life, metta does not require sitting in meditation. It can be practiced anywhere, in any moment, with anyone. This is one of the things that makes it so practical and so accessible. You are standing in a line. The person behind the counter is slow, distracted, perhaps having a difficult day. You feel the familiar tightening, the impatience beginning to rise. And then, without saying anything out loud, you offer metta. You wish them well. You simply shift the quality of your attention from irritation to friendliness. Something changes. It may be subtle. The tightness in your chest softens. Your face relaxes. You find yourself meeting the person's eyes with a little more warmth. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they feel it. They soften too. The interaction changes quality, and both of you walk away lighter than you would have otherwise. This is metta in its simplest, most available form. A small shift in how you hold another person in your heart. It costs nothing. It takes no time, and its effects ripple outward in ways you may never see. You can practice it on the bus, in a meeting, during a phone call, walking through a grocery store. Each person you encounter is carrying something. You do not know what it is. You do not need to know. You simply hold them with a little more warmth than you otherwise would, and something in the space between you changes. The Buddhist tradition holds that metta is one of the most powerful forces available to a human being. It can transform relationships, dissolve resentment, heal old wounds. The Buddha listed 11 benefits of practicing loving kindness, among them peaceful sleep, a calm mind, and the goodwill of others. But perhaps the deepest benefit is the simplest, a warm heart. A heart that defaults to friendliness. A heart that meets the world with openness rather than suspicion. And it begins with the smallest possible gesture, the willingness to wish someone well. There is one more thing about loving kindness that deserves attention, and it is the part many people skip. Metta toward yourself. In the traditional practice, you begin with yourself. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. And for many people, this is the hardest part of the entire practice. The warmth that flows easily toward a friend or a child gets stuck when directed inward. The reasons for this vary. Some people feel they do not deserve kindness. Some feel it is selfish to wish themselves well. Some simply find it uncomfortable, like looking at their own reflection for too long. The Buddhist teaching on this is clear. You cannot give what you do not have. If your heart is dry, you cannot water anyone else's garden. Metta toward yourself is the well from which all other metta is drawn. It is the foundation, and without it, the practice tends to become a performance, kindness offered outward, while the inner landscape remains harsh and barren. Being kind to yourself does not mean indulging yourself. It does not mean avoiding difficulty or lowering your standards. It means treating yourself with the same basic friendliness you would offer a good friend. It means acknowledging your struggles without adding judgment on top of them. It means recognizing that you, too, are a being who deserves to be safe, happy, healthy, and at ease. Many of the Buddhist teachers have noted that self-metta is often the place where the practice becomes real. It is easy to wish well-being to a friend. It is easy, in the abstract, to wish it to all beings. But to turn that warmth toward your own tired heart, your own imperfect efforts, your own repeated failures and small victories, this is where metta stops being a concept and becomes something you actually feel. And when you feel it, even briefly, something opens. The harshness softens. The inner critic quiets, even for a moment. You glimpse what it might be like to move through your life as your own ally, rather than your own adversary. And that glimpse, according to the Buddhist tradition, is the beginning of a transformation that touches everything. This is one of the unexpected turns of Buddhist practice. Many people come to it looking for something beyond themselves, some higher truth, some escape from the mess of ordinary life. And the first thing the practice says is, begin here. Begin with yourself. Begin with friendliness toward the one who is sitting in this seat, breathing this breath, living this life. The Buddha once said that you can search the whole world over and never find anyone more deserving of your love than yourself. This is not vanity. It is the recognition that the heart you are trying to cultivate has to include its own owner. Otherwise, the garden has a hole in the middle of it, and everything planted around it eventually tilts inward toward that empty space. Metta toward yourself fills that space. And from a full heart, kindness flows naturally outward, the way water flows downhill. You do not have to force it. You do not have to manufacture it. You simply have to stop blocking it, and it goes where it is needed. This is the perfection of loving kindness. A heart that defaults to warmth. A heart that meets the world with friendliness, steadily and consistently, until friendliness becomes the natural way of being. The monks who returned to the forest discovered this. They went back to the same trees, the same darkness, the same spirits. Nothing outside had changed. But they carried something different with them, and that something changed everything. The forest that had been hostile became peaceful. The spirits that had been frightening became allies. You carry the same capacity. In every room you enter, in every conversation you have, in every encounter with another living being, you can bring the quality of metta. It is always available. It does not run out. And the more you offer it, the more of it there seems to be. This is one of the things the Buddhist teachers noticed about metta. It is one of the few things in life that grows by being given away. Rest here for a moment. Let the warmth of this teaching settle wherever it wants to settle. You do not need to direct it or control it. Simply allow friendliness to be present, like sunlight falling through a window, landing wherever it lands. Whenever you are ready, we will continue. Generosity may be the most familiar of all the perfections. Everyone knows what it means to give. And yet the Buddhist understanding of dana, as it is called in Pali, goes deeper than most people expect. Dana includes the giving of money and material things, certainly. But it also includes the giving of time, attention, energy, forgiveness, space. It includes the willingness to offer something of yourself without calculating what you will receive in return. In its fullest expression, dana is a quality of openness, a heart that moves naturally toward offering rather than holding. In the traditional Buddhist path, generosity is listed first among the perfections. The Buddha taught it before meditation, before wisdom, before any form of inner discipline. This was deliberate. Generosity loosens something. It works directly against the tightness of self-concern, the constant calculation of what is mine and what I might lose. Every act of giving, however small, is an act of releasing, and releasing is the fundamental movement of the entire path. We have already explored loving kindness, which is the warmth of the heart. Generosity is that warmth expressed in action. Metta wishes well. Dana gives. The Buddha described generosity as one of the most direct ways to experience happiness. He said that if people truly understood the fruit of giving and sharing, they would not eat a single meal without first offering some of it. This is not a commandment. It is an observation. The act of giving produces a particular kind of joy that receiving cannot match. It is the joy of the open hand. There is a story from the Buddhist tradition about a woman who had nothing. She lived on the outskirts of a city, surviving on what she could find. She had no money, no possessions, no standing in the community. By any measure, she was the poorest person in the region. In the social order of her time, she was invisible. One evening, the Buddha was teaching nearby, and many people came to offer lamps in his honor. The wealthy citizens brought large, elaborate lamps filled with the finest oil. They burned brightly, dozens of them, lighting up the night. It was an impressive display of devotion and means. The woman wanted to offer a lamp too, but she had nothing. After searching through everything she had, she managed to gather just enough oil for a single small lamp, barely a flicker compared to the grand offerings around it. She lit it and placed it among the others, then stepped back into the shadows. Through the night, a wind came up. One by one, the large, expensive lamps sputtered and went out. The monk in charge of tending the lamps tried to relight them, but the wind was persistent. By morning, every lamp had been extinguished. Every lamp except one. The small lamp, the one offered by the woman who had nothing, continued to burn. The monk tried to put it out so he could clean the area, but he could not. He blew on it, he fanned it, he covered it. The flame would not go out. The Buddha, seeing this, explained, "This lamp cannot be extinguished," he said, "because it was offered with complete sincerity." The wealthy donors gave from their surplus. They gave what they could easily afford, and their giving cost them nothing. This woman gave everything she had. Her lamp burns with the power of a heart that held nothing back. This story teaches something that runs through all of Buddhist thought about generosity. The value of a gift is not measured by its size. It is measured by the spirit in which it is given. A wealthy person who donates a large sum but feels no connection to the act, who gives because it is expected or because it looks good, has practiced a kind of generosity, certainly. But the heart has not moved. The fist has not opened. The giving was a transaction, and the giver remains essentially unchanged. A person who gives a small thing with their whole heart, who offers what they can, even when what they can offer is almost nothing, has practiced something deeper. They have loosened the grip. They have acted from openness rather than calculation. And something in them has shifted as a result. The Buddhist teaching here is clear. Generosity is not about the gift. It is about the giver. It is about what happens inside you when you offer something freely, without holding back, without counting the cost. There is a phrase in the Buddhist texts that describes the ideal quality of giving. It says one should give with a heart that is not stuck, a heart that releases the gift completely, the way you release a ball when you throw it. Once it has left your hand, it is gone. You do not reach after it. You do not track its flight. You offered it, and now it belongs to the world. This quality of non-attachment in giving is what transforms an ordinary act of charity into dana as a perfection. Many people can give. Fewer can give without keeping one hand on the gift. In the Zen tradition, a master named Ryokan, who lived alone in a small hut at the foot of a mountain. Ryokan owned almost nothing. His hut was bare. He had a few clothes, a bowl, and little else. He spent his days in practice and his evenings watching the sky. One night, while Ryokan was away, a thief broke into the hut. He searched the place thoroughly, but there was nothing to take. The hut was as empty as it looked. Ryokan returned home and found the thief still there, embarrassed and empty-handed. Most people in this situation would feel anger or fear, or at the very least irritation. Ryokan felt something else. "You have come a long way to visit me," he said to the thief, "and you should not leave empty-handed. Please, take my clothes as a gift." The thief was bewildered. He took the clothes and hurried away into the night. Ryokan, now sitting with nothing at all, looked up at the sky. The moon was full and bright, hanging over the mountain. "Poor fellow," he said. "I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." There are many things happening in this story, but for our exploration of generosity, notice what Ryokan does with what could have been a moment of conflict. He does not protect what is his. He does not assert his rights. He does not even acknowledge the violation. Instead, he sees a person in need, and he gives. He gives the only thing he has left, the clothes on his body, and then he wishes he could give more. This is generosity in its most complete form. It has gone beyond the calculation of what is fair or reasonable. It has moved past the boundary between mine and yours. Ryokan is not giving because he should. He is giving because giving is what arises naturally in a heart that is not clenched around itself. And notice the last line. He does not feel diminished by having given everything. He feels regret that he could not give more. The moon is beautiful, and he wants to share it. His poverty has become a kind of wealth, because a person who can sit naked under the moon and feel abundant has discovered something that money cannot buy. In the Zen tradition, this story is understood as a teaching about what remains when everything external has been stripped away. What remains is the capacity to give. And that capacity, it turns out, is inexhaustible. Ryokan did not give because he had a lot. He gave because giving was his nature. The thief came looking for things and found a person instead. A person so free from attachment that he could offer his last possessions to a stranger and then sit in the moonlight feeling rich. This is what the Buddhist tradition means when it says that generosity is the beginning of the path. It is not just a nice thing to do. It is a practice that slowly rewires the heart, shifting it from contraction to openness, from holding to offering, from scarcity to abundance. And this shift, once it begins, touches everything else. In daily life, generosity does not require grand gestures or material wealth. The Buddhist tradition recognizes many forms of giving, and some of the most valuable have nothing to do with money. There is the giving of attention. In a world where most people are only half listening, fully attending to another person is one of the most generous things you can do. To put down your phone, to stop preparing your response, to simply be present with someone, this is dana. There is the giving of space. Sometimes the most generous thing you can offer is room for someone to be themselves, to make their own choices, to find their own way without your interference or judgment. There is the giving of forgiveness. Letting go of a grievance, releasing someone from the debt of an old hurt. This is one of the most difficult and most liberating forms of generosity. And there is the giving of your own comfort. Choosing to be inconvenienced so that someone else is more at ease. Letting someone else go first. Offering your seat, your time, your patience. These are the forms of dana that require no wealth at all, only a willingness to place someone else's needs alongside your own. In Buddhism, each of these acts, however small, works against the contraction of self-concern. Each one loosens the grip a little. And the Buddhist teaching is that this loosening is itself the path. You do not become generous and then begin the spiritual journey. The generosity is the journey. Every act of giving is a step. In one teaching, a man who found it impossible to give. He was not cruel or selfish in any obvious way. He simply could not bring himself to part with anything. His hand would not open. The impulse to hold was too strong. A teacher worked with him patiently. Rather than asking him to give something to another person, which felt impossible, the teacher asked him to pick up a small stone in his right hand and pass it to his left hand. Just that. Move something from one hand to the other. The man did this. It was not giving, exactly. But it was the motion of giving. It was the rehearsal. And from that small beginning, over time, the man's capacity grew. He passed stones, then he passed food, then he offered things to others. The muscle of giving developed, one small movement at a time. This story is a reminder that generosity, like all the perfections, does not require dramatic action. It requires practice, and practice can begin anywhere, at any scale, with whatever you are able to offer right now. There is one more dimension of generosity that the Buddhist tradition emphasizes. It is the practice of giving without attachment to the result. Many of us give with a thread still connecting us to the gift. We give, and then we watch. Did they appreciate it? Did they use it well? Did they reciprocate? The gift has left our hands, but our attention is still tracking it, still invested in what happens next. In the Buddhist understanding, this attachment to outcome diminishes the giving. It keeps the fist partially closed. The gift has been released, but the expectation has not. True dana, as the Buddhist teachers describe it, is a complete release. You give, and then you let go of having given. You do not track the gift. You do not measure the response. You do not keep a ledger, even a subtle one, of who owes you what. This is hard. It may be the hardest part of generosity, but it is also where the real freedom lives. When you can give without needing anything in return, you discover that the act of giving was itself the reward. The opening of the hand, the releasing of the grip, the moment of selflessness, these are their own payment. Nothing else is needed. Buddhism describes 3 kinds of giving. The first is giving with reluctance, where you offer something but part of you holds back, wishing you could keep it. The second is giving as an equal, where you offer what you can without struggle. The third is giving from overflow, where the giving happens as naturally as breathing, because the heart is so full that holding back would feel unnatural. This third kind of giving is dana as a perfection. It is where the practice is heading, even if it begins with the first. The woman's lamp burned through the night because she gave with nothing held back. Ryokan wished he could give the moon because he had no concept of keeping anything for himself. The man who could not give began by passing a stone from one hand to the other. In each case, the practice began where the person actually was, and it grew from there. This is what dana looks like when it becomes a perfection. A heart that gives as naturally as it breathes. A hand that opens as easily as it closes. A life that moves toward offering the way water moves downhill, without effort, without agenda, simply because that is its nature. In the Buddhist understanding, generosity is both the beginning of the path and its fruit. You start by practicing it. You develop it over years. And eventually, if the practice deepens enough, giving becomes simply the way you move through the world. You do not think about it. You do not decide to be generous. The heart is open, and what flows from an open heart is generosity, as naturally as light flows from a flame. Rest here for a moment. Let your hands rest open, palms up, wherever they are. You do not need to give anything right now. Simply notice what it feels like to hold nothing, to grip nothing, to let the hands be soft and the heart be still. And when you are ready, we will explore the 8th perfection together. This perfection tends to meet the most resistance. The Pali word is nekkhamma, and in English it is usually translated as renunciation. For many people, that word immediately conjures images of deprivation, giving things up, going without, living in a cave, eating rice. But the Buddhist understanding of renunciation is very different from deprivation. It is closer to the experience of outgrowing something. Think of how a child outgrows certain toys. There is no struggle, no sense of loss. The child simply loses interest because they have moved on to something that fits them better. What once seemed essential now seems beside the point. Renunciation, in the Buddhist sense, is this kind of natural releasing. It is the recognition that certain things you have been holding on to, certain habits, certain desires, certain ways of living, no longer serve you. And the letting go of them is not a sacrifice. It is a relief. Generosity is the practice of giving to others. Renunciation is the practice of releasing for yourself. It is the discovery that less can feel like more, and that freedom often lives on the other side of something you were afraid to put down. The Buddha himself came to renunciation through experience. Before his awakening, he lived a life of extraordinary comfort. He had wealth, a family, every pleasure available to him. And he walked away from all of it because he recognized that none of it was addressing the deepest question of his life. His renunciation was not an act of rejection. It was an act of honesty. He was holding things that were not making him free, and he set them down to find what would. In one of the most beloved Zen stories, two monks were walking together on a muddy road after a heavy rain. They had been walking for some time in silence, as monks often do. The older monk was experienced, many years into his practice. The younger monk was newer, earnest, careful about the rules. They came to a crossing where a young woman stood at the edge of a deep puddle. She was dressed in fine clothes and could not cross without ruining them. She looked distressed, glancing back and forth between the mud and the road ahead. The older monk, without a word, walked up to her, lifted her in his arms, carried her across the mud, and set her down on the other side. She thanked him and went on her way. The two monks continued walking. The younger monk said nothing, but his face said everything. His jaw was tight. His steps were stiff. Something was churning in him, and it churned for hours. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he spoke. "How could you do that?" he said. "We are monks. We have taken vows. We are not supposed to touch a woman. How could you carry her like that?" The older monk looked at him with a calm expression. "I put her down at the crossing," he said. "You are still carrying her." This is one of the most beloved stories in the Zen tradition, and its teaching goes to the heart of renunciation. The older monk picked something up, and then he put it down. That was the end of it. He responded to what the moment required, and when the moment passed, he let it go. There was no residue, no story, no replaying of the event. He moved on. The younger monk could not do this. He picked up the experience and held it for hours. He turned it over in his mind, examined it from every angle, built a case against his companion, worked himself into a state of agitation. He was carrying something that no longer existed, and it was making him miserable. In the Buddhist teaching, this is what renunciation addresses. It is the capacity to put things down after you have picked them up, to let experiences pass through you rather than accumulate, to finish with one moment before you move to the next. Many of us are like the younger monk, more often than we realize. We carry conversations long after they have ended. We replay decisions we have already made. We hold on to grievances, worries, regrets, turning them over in our hands like stones we cannot seem to drop. And the weight of all this carrying is real, even though none of it exists anymore except in our minds. The Buddhist teaching on this is straightforward. The past is gone. It cannot be changed, revisited, or undone. When you carry it with you, you are carrying something that has no substance, and yet it weighs as much as anything you have ever held. This is one of the great paradoxes of the mind. It can be burdened by things that do not exist. Renunciation is the practice of setting these things down, one by one, as you notice them, not through force, but through the recognition that you are holding something you no longer need. The older monk did not struggle to put the woman down. He simply arrived at the other side of the crossing and let go. It was the most natural thing in the world. There is a teaching from the Thai forest tradition that approaches renunciation from a different angle. A teacher named Ajahn Chah was known for his ability to make complex Buddhist ideas simple and direct. One day, he held up a drinking glass during a talk. "Do you see this glass?" he said. "I love this glass. It holds my water. It catches the light. When I tap it, it rings." He paused. "But for me, this glass is already broken." The students looked at the glass, which was clearly intact. "I know that one day this glass will fall, or be knocked from the table, or simply wear out. Its breaking is already part of it. Because I understand this, I can enjoy it completely right now. I can appreciate it without clinging to it. When it breaks, I will not be shocked, and I will not suffer. I will simply say, of course." This teaching is one of the most quoted in the Theravada tradition, and for good reason. It captures the essence of Buddhist renunciation in a single image. This teaching contains the essence of Buddhist renunciation. It is not about getting rid of things. Ajahn Chah did not throw the glass away. He used it. He enjoyed it. He even said he loved it. What he released was the demand that it last forever. The insistence that things remain as they are. The grip that says this is mine and it must not change. In the Buddhist understanding, suffering arises not from having things, but from clinging to them. You can enjoy your home, your relationships, your work, your health, all of it, without insisting that any of it be permanent. You can hold the glass and drink from it and appreciate its beauty, all while knowing that it will one day break. And that knowing, rather than diminishing the enjoyment, actually deepens it. You appreciate the glass more when you understand that it is temporary. There is a paradox here that many people discover through practice. The tighter you hold something, the less you can feel it. Your grip blocks your sensitivity. But when you hold something lightly, when you release the clinging while keeping the appreciation, you actually experience it more fully. The colors are brighter. The moments are richer. You are present for what is here because you are not distracted by the fear of losing it. This is the freedom that renunciation offers. You do not have to give up your life. You give up the illusion that your life will stay the same. And in releasing that illusion, you become available for what is actually here, which is always changing, always new, always offering something you could not have predicted. The Buddhist tradition calls this anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Everything passes. This is not a grim pronouncement. It is a description of reality, and when you align yourself with it rather than fighting it, a remarkable lightness becomes available. You stop bracing. You stop gripping. You hold the glass. You drink from it. And you appreciate that this moment, this sip, this light through the glass, will never come again in exactly this way. And that is what makes it precious. In daily life, renunciation shows up in small, practical ways. It is the moment you realize you have been scrolling through your phone for 20 minutes without purpose, and you set it down. Not with guilt or self-criticism, but with the simple recognition that this is not serving you right now. It is the moment you notice you have been rehearsing an argument in your head, running through what you should have said, and you let the rehearsal go. The argument is over. The replaying does nothing except keep you agitated. You are carrying something that has already been set down at the crossing. It is the moment you recognize that a habit, a relationship, a way of thinking has run its course. It was useful once, perhaps. It may have served you for years. But it no longer fits, and holding on to it out of familiarity is costing you something. In the Buddhist tradition, there is an image for this. It is the image of a snake shedding its skin. The old skin was once necessary. It protected the snake, allowed it to grow, but at a certain point it becomes too tight. It constricts, and the snake must leave it behind in order to continue growing. This is not loss. The snake does not mourn its old skin. It simply moves forward, lighter and more alive than before. The shedding is part of the growing. They cannot be separated. Many of the things we hold on to are old skins. Identities that once fit but no longer do. Beliefs about ourselves that were formed in childhood and never updated. Habits that began as solutions to problems we no longer have. Relationships that continue out of obligation rather than genuine connection. Goals we set years ago that no longer reflect who we are becoming. They remain because they are familiar, and familiarity can feel like necessity. But they are not necessary. They are simply old. Consider how this might show up in your own life. Perhaps there is a version of yourself that you have been maintaining for others, a role you play at work, in your family, among friends, that no longer fits the person you have become. You keep wearing it because people expect it, because changing would require explanations, because the old skin is familiar even when it is too tight. Or perhaps there is a desire you have been chasing for years, something you thought would make you happy, and you are beginning to realize it will not. But you keep chasing it because you have invested so much in the pursuit. To stop would feel like admitting the investment was wasted. The Buddhist teaching would say, the investment was not wasted. It brought you to this point of recognition. And now you can set it down, with gratitude for what it taught you, and move forward into whatever comes next. The capacity to do this, to pick things up and put them down with ease, is one of the most practical freedoms a person can develop. In Buddhism, it is sometimes described as traveling light. You move through life without accumulating unnecessary weight. You take what you need, you use it fully, and when it has served its purpose, you release it. The younger monk suffered because he could not release. The older monk was at peace because he could. The glass will one day break, and Ajahn Chah will say, of course. This is renunciation. It is the art of holding life without strangling it. And like all the perfections, it grows through practice. Small releases, made daily, build the capacity for larger ones. You let go of a minor irritation. You release a small expectation. You put down an old story you have been telling about yourself. Each of these is a rehearsal for the bigger releases that life will eventually ask of you. And when those bigger moments come, you will find that the muscle is there, developed through 1,000 small acts of letting go. The Buddhist tradition teaches that renunciation is closely linked to contentment. When you stop reaching for what you do not have, you begin to notice what you do have. When you release the fantasy of how things should be, you can appreciate how things actually are. And in that appreciation, a kind of richness appears that has nothing to do with accumulation. Ajahn Chah enjoyed his glass more than most people enjoy their finest possessions, because he held it with open hands. The older monk walked lightly because he set things down as soon as they were finished. This is the invitation of Nekkhamma. Hold what you have with appreciation and without clinging, and when it is time, let it go with the same ease with which it came. Rest here for a moment. Notice if there is anything you are carrying right now that has already passed. a thought from earlier today, a feeling from this morning, a conversation that ended hours ago but is still turning in your mind. You do not need to force it away. Simply notice that you are still holding it and see if the noticing itself allows the grip to soften. We will continue together when you are ready. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. You rest, you recover, you go back to your life, and within hours the fatigue returns. It is not physical. It is something else, a depletion that has more to do with how you are living than with how much you are sleeping. The Buddhist perfection of energy, virya in Pali, addresses this directly. It is not about having more energy in the way an extra cup of coffee provides more energy. It is about the quality of your engagement with life, the difference between being dragged through your days and moving through them with some degree of aliveness and purpose. Renunciation is the art of putting things down. Energy is the art of picking up the right things. It is the vitality that comes from being aligned with what matters to you, and it is the capacity to sustain that alignment over time. In the Buddhist tradition, energy is understood as something that can be cultivated and protected. It is not a fixed quantity that you either have or do not have. It is more like a fire that can be tended, fed the right fuel, sheltered from the wind, and allowed to burn steadily. The Buddha listed energy as one of the 5 spiritual faculties, alongside faith, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. He placed it at the center of the list, and this positioning was deliberate. Energy is what keeps the other faculties active. Without it, faith becomes passive, mindfulness becomes dull, concentration becomes rigid, and wisdom becomes theoretical. Energy is the animating force that brings everything else to life. The most famous teaching on energy in the Buddhist tradition is a conversation between the Buddha and a monk named Sona. Before becoming a monk, Sona had been a musician. He played a stringed instrument called a veena, and he was accomplished at it. He understood music from the inside, the way a craftsman understands wood or a gardener understands soil. When Sona entered the monastic life, he brought the same intensity he had brought to music. He practiced with fierce determination. He did walking meditation until his feet cracked from the effort. He pushed himself relentlessly, convinced that more effort would bring faster results. But the results did not come. Despite all his striving, Sona felt no closer to understanding than when he had begun. He was exhausted, discouraged, and beginning to wonder whether he should return to his old life. Perhaps the path was not for him. Perhaps he simply did not have what it took. The Buddha, hearing of Sona's struggle, came to see him. He did not lecture Sona or tell him to try harder. He did not suggest a new technique or a different approach. Instead, knowing Sona's background, he asked a question that met the monk exactly where he was. Sona, when you played the veena, what happened when you tuned the strings too tightly? Sona knew the answer immediately. The sound was harsh. The notes were sharp and strained. And if I tightened them further, the strings would snap. And when the strings were too loose, there was no sound at all. The strings just flopped. No tone, no resonance. Nothing worth hearing. And when the strings were tuned to the middle, neither too tight nor too loose, then the instrument could sing. The notes were clear and true. That is where the music lived. The Buddha nodded. Your practice is the same. When your effort is too intense, It leads to strain and restlessness. When it is too slack, it leads to dullness and lethargy. Find the middle pitch, and your practice will find its voice. Sona understood. He adjusted his approach, easing back from the relentless pushing, and in time, he found what all his striving had not been able to produce. This teaching is one of the most practical in the entire Buddhist tradition. It applies to meditation, certainly, but it applies equally to the way we approach our work, our relationships, our health, our entire lives. Many people approach their lives the way Sona approached his practice. They push. They strive. They operate on the assumption that more effort always produces better results. And for a while, it seems to work. The intensity produces output. The grinding produces progress. But there is a cost. The strings begin to fray. The body tightens. The mind grows rigid. Joy drains away, replaced by a determination to keep going regardless. This is the too tight string, and many people live on it for years without recognizing what is happening. They mistake the tension for commitment. They confuse strain with dedication. Others swing to the opposite extreme. Exhausted by the striving, they collapse into passivity. They disengage. They lose motivation. They go through the motions, but the aliveness has gone out of things. This is the too loose string, and it has its own kind of suffering. The suffering of disconnection, of feeling that nothing quite matters, of watching your days pass without being fully present for any of them. The Buddha's teaching to Sona points to something between these two. A place where effort is present but not forced. Where engagement is real but not desperate. Where the strings are taut enough to produce a clear tone but not so taut that they are in danger of breaking. What makes this teaching so useful is the image itself. The vina. Anyone who has tuned an instrument knows that the right pitch is not found through thinking. It is found through listening. You adjust, you listen, you adjust again. You feel your way toward the note. It is a dialogue between you and the instrument, and it requires sensitivity rather than force. The same is true of your life. The right level of energy, the right pitch for your effort, changes day by day, sometimes hour by hour. What felt right yesterday may be too much today. What was enough last week may be too little this week. The practice is to keep listening, to keep adjusting, to stay in conversation with your own capacity rather than imposing a fixed standard on it. In the Buddhist tradition, this middle pitch is called right effort, and it is considered one of the most important skills on the path. It is the ability to bring energy to what you are doing without overdoing it, to care without gripping, to be diligent without being driven. The Zen tradition approaches energy from a different angle. A student came to his teacher feeling overwhelmed. He had been trying to practice mindfulness throughout his day, to be aware of his breath, his posture, his thoughts, his interactions with others. He was monitoring everything, and it was exhausting him. "I cannot keep up," he said. "There is too much to be aware of. I try to watch everything, and by the end of the day, I am more tired than when I started. The practice is supposed to give me energy, and instead it is draining me." The teacher listened and then asked, "When you walk from one room to another in your house, do you carry all the furniture with you?" The student was confused. "Of course not." "Then why do you carry all your awareness at once? When you are in the kitchen, be in the kitchen. When you leave the kitchen, leave it behind. Take only what you need for the next room. The student sat with this for a moment. He realized he had been trying to hold his entire life in his awareness simultaneously. His work, his relationships, his practice, his plans for tomorrow, his regrets about yesterday. He was carrying every room at once and wondering why he was exhausted. This is a teaching about the economy of energy. Many people waste enormous amounts of vitality trying to hold everything at once. They carry their work into their rest into their work, their morning into their afternoon. They are never fully in one place because their attention is distributed across many places simultaneously. The Zen approach to energy is focused presence. Be where you are, fully. And when you move, leave where you were behind. This is not about doing less. The teacher in the story was not suggesting the student stop practicing. He was suggesting the student stop carrying all the rooms at once. When you are present for one thing at a time, energy is naturally conserved. You are not leaking vitality in a dozen directions. Your attention is gathered, like the strings of the veena tuned to a single clear pitch. And from that gathered attention, a surprising amount of energy becomes available. There is a reason that people often feel energized after a period of deep focus, even if the work was demanding. The energy was not drained by the work. It was drained by everything else. The worry running in the background, the half-finished thoughts about other tasks, the mental tab switching that fragments attention throughout the day. When all of that falls away and you are simply here, doing this one thing, the energy that was being scattered is suddenly concentrated. And concentrated energy feels like aliveness. The Buddhist tradition has a word for this kind of gathered attention. It is samadhi, sometimes translated as concentration, sometimes as unification of mind. In the context of energy, samadhi is what happens when you stop dividing yourself among many things and give yourself fully to one. The result is not exhaustion. It is the opposite. It is the feeling of being fully alive, fully engaged, fully here. You have probably experienced this. A conversation where you were completely present and afterward you felt more energized than before. A period of work where you lost track of time, and when you emerged you felt renewed rather than depleted. These are moments of natural samadhi, and they show you what is possible when energy is gathered rather than scattered. The Buddhist path does not ask you to sustain this kind of gathered attention every moment of every day. That would be the too tight string again. It simply invites you to notice the difference between scattered energy and gathered energy, and to move, when you can, in the direction of gathering. In daily life, the Buddhist teaching on energy invites a kind of honest audit. Where is your energy actually going? Many people are tired not because they are doing too much, but because they are spending energy on things that do not return anything. Worry is one of the great energy drains. You can spend hours worrying about something and arrive at the end of those hours with nothing to show for it except exhaustion. The concern is still there, unchanged, but you have less energy to address it. Resentment is another drain. Carrying a grudge takes real energy, a constant low-level expenditure that runs in the background of your day, pulling resources away from whatever you are actually trying to do. Distraction is another. The constant shifting of attention, the checking, the scrolling, the jumping from one thing to the next, each shift costs something. The mind has to reorient, re-engage, rebuild its focus. Over the course of a day, these micro costs add up to real depletion. The Buddhist approach to energy is partly about generating more, through practice, through care for the body, through alignment with what matters. But it is equally about wasting less. When you stop pouring energy into worry, resentment, and distraction, you may find that there is more available for the things that actually nourish you. The teaching is practical. It does not ask you to meditate for hours or to adopt a monastic schedule. It asks you to pay attention to what is draining you and to consider whether that expenditure is necessary. Often, it is not. Often, the energy you thought you lacked was simply going somewhere you had not noticed. Sona did not need more effort. He needed better effort. The right amount, applied in the right way, with the right quality of attention. And the music came. This is virya as a perfection. It is the energy that sustains the path over the long arc of a life. It is present in the first meditation and the 10,000th. It is there in the moments of inspiration and in the ordinary days when nothing feels special. It is the fire that burns steadily because it is fed the right fuel, not too much, not too little, just enough to keep going. And like Sona's Veena, when the tuning is right, something begins to sing. Not because you forced it, because you listened and you found the note. Rest here for a moment. Notice the quality of your energy right now. You do not need to change it or improve it. Simply feel where you are. The body knows whether the strings are too tight or too loose. Trust what it tells you. And when you are ready, we will explore the 10th and final perfection together. We come now to the last of the 10 perfections, and it is the one that may carry the most baggage. The Pali word is sila, and it is usually translated as ethics, or virtue, or moral conduct. For many people, these words arrive with a weight attached to them. Rules, obligations, the feeling of being told what to do and what not to do. This is why we placed ethics at the end of our exploration. By now, having spent time with truthfulness, wisdom, equanimity, resolve, patience, loving kindness, generosity, renunciation, and energy, you have a feeling for what these perfections are. They are not rules imposed from outside. They are qualities that grow from within, naturally, when given the right conditions. Ethics, understood in the Buddhist way, is no different. In the Buddhist tradition, sila is not a set of commandments handed down by an authority. It is more like the natural behavior of a heart that has been cleared. When greed is less present, you do not need a rule against taking what is not yours. When anger is less present, you do not need a rule against harming others. When confusion is less present, you naturally move toward what is wholesome and away from what causes suffering. Ethics, in this understanding, is what you do when you are seeing clearly. It is wisdom expressed in action. Consider how this connects to everything we have explored. Truthfulness clears the fog so you can see what is real. Wisdom widens the view so you can see more of it. Equanimity steadies you so you can stand in what you see. And ethics is what happens when you act from that clear, wide, steady place. The action that arises from clarity tends to be wholesome. The way water that flows from a clean source tends to be clean. This is why the Buddhist tradition places sila among the perfections rather than among the rules. It is something that develops as the other qualities develop. The more truthful you become, the more naturally ethical your speech becomes. The more patient you become, the less likely you are to act from anger. The more generous you become, the less inclined you are to take what is not offered. Ethics grows as the heart grows. There is a story from the Zen tradition about the master Bankei, who held large gatherings for meditation practice. Students came from across the country to sit with him, sometimes hundreds at a time. During one of these gatherings, a student was caught stealing from the others. The matter was reported to Bankei with a request that the student be sent away. Bankei said nothing and took no action. Some time later, the same student was caught stealing again. The other students were outraged. They wrote a petition, signed by many of them, demanding that the thief be expelled. If Bankei refused, they said, they would all leave. The petition was reasonable. The community had rules, and this student had broken them repeatedly. The others felt unsafe, and they wanted the problem removed. Bankei read the petition carefully. Then he called everyone together. "You are all wise students," he said. "You know the difference between right and wrong. You could go anywhere and study with any teacher, and you would do well. But this person who steals does not yet know the difference between right and wrong. If I do not teach him, who will? I will keep him here, even if every one of you leaves." The room was still. The students who had written the petition felt the force of what Bankei had said. They had been thinking about the community. Bankei was thinking about the person. And the student who had been stealing, hearing that someone believed he was worth keeping, began to cry. No one left, and the stealing stopped. This story teaches something important about the Buddhist approach to ethics. Bankei did not ignore the wrongdoing. He did not pretend it was acceptable. But he responded to it with something other than punishment. He responded with understanding and with care. He recognized that the student who stole was the one who most needed to be there. The other students already understood ethical conduct. They had developed sila, at least to a workable degree. The thief had not. Sending him away would have protected the community, but it would have abandoned the person who needed help the most. In Buddhism, ethics is understood as a practice, something that develops over time, not a fixed standard that you either meet or fail. Some people arrive with a strong sense of sila. Others have to develop it. The path includes both, and it does not give up on either. This is a very different approach from the one many of us grew up with. In most cultures, ethics is framed as compliance. Follow the rules, and you are good. Break the rules, and you are bad. The focus is on the behavior, and the response to transgression is punishment. The Buddhist approach shifts the focus from the behavior to the person. Why did they act this way? What is driving the action? What quality is missing that, if developed, would make the harmful behavior unnecessary? This is why sila is listed among the perfections. It is not a barrier to entry. It is a quality to be cultivated, like patience or wisdom, through practice and over time. Bankei saw the student who stole as someone whose sila had not yet developed, not as someone who was fundamentally broken. And by keeping him close, by refusing to cast him out, Bankei created the conditions in which that development could happen. The student's tears were not tears of shame. They were tears of being seen, fully, including the worst of himself, and not being rejected. This is one of the most compassionate things a teacher can do. And it reflects a deep Buddhist understanding that ethical conduct grows best in an atmosphere of trust, not in an atmosphere of fear. There is another dimension of ethics in the Buddhist tradition that many practitioners discover for themselves, and it comes as a surprise. Virtue feels good. This may sound obvious, but for many people, it is a genuine revelation. They grew up associating virtue with restriction, with being told no, with the suppression of desire. Virtue felt like something imposed from outside, something that limited their freedom. But when sila develops from within, through practice and through the clearing of the heart, it has a completely different quality. There is a feeling of inner cleanliness that comes with ethical conduct, a transparency, a sense that there is nothing to hide, nothing to manage, nothing to keep track of. It is the same relief that comes with truthfulness, the closing of the gap between inside and outside, extended now to everything you do. One meditation teacher described discovering this during a long retreat. Weeks of practice had slowly cleared away layers of mental noise, and what remained was a feeling of remarkable purity. The heart felt clean, and from that cleanliness, ethical conduct was effortless. There was no temptation to lie, because honesty was simply what arose. There was no impulse to harm, because kindness was what was present. Virtue was not something he was doing. It was something he was. This experience changed his understanding of ethics entirely. He realized that sila, at its deepest, is not about following rules. It is about uncovering something that is already there. When the greed and anger and confusion are cleared away, what remains is naturally virtuous. The heart, in its unclouded state, does not want to harm. It wants to care. The Buddhist tradition calls this the beauty of virtue. It is one of the lesser-known teachings, but practitioners who encounter it are often deeply moved. They discover that the ethical life, far from being a burden, is actually a source of joy. Living with integrity produces a kind of inner harmony that nothing else can replicate. The Buddhist tradition presents ethics in the form of 5 precepts, which are not commandments, but training guidelines. They are commitments to refrain from harming living beings, from taking what is not offered, from sexual misconduct, from harmful speech, and from intoxicants that cloud the mind. These 5 are sometimes described as gifts. When you commit to not harming, you give the gift of safety to everyone around you. When you commit to not stealing, you give the gift of trust. When you commit to honest speech, you give the gift of reliability. Each precept, understood this way, is an act of generosity directed toward the world. The Buddha called the precepts streams of merit and said that they ripen as happiness. This is a striking claim. He did not say the precepts lead to respectability or social approval or a good reputation. He said they ripen as happiness. The practice of ethical conduct, sustained over time, produces a form of inner well-being that comes from nowhere else. This connects ethics back to where we began. Dana, generosity, opens the traditional path. Sila, ethics, completes it. The first is giving from the hand. The last is giving from the whole of your conduct, offering the people around you a person they can trust, a person who will not harm them, a person whose presence makes the space safer for everyone. In the Buddhist understanding, this is one of the most profound forms of giving there is. You may not be able to give money or time or material things, but you can give your integrity. You can give your care with how you speak and how you act. You can give the people in your life the experience of being around someone who is not going to cause unnecessary suffering. This is sila as a perfection. It is ethics as an expression of love. Of all the areas where sila shows up in daily life, speech may be the most immediate. The Buddhist tradition pays particular attention to how we speak. The Buddha compared truthful speech to flowers and false speech to dung. He identified 4 kinds of speech to be mindful of: lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. Each of these, in its own way, creates ripples of harm that extend far beyond the moment of speaking. Many people are careful with their actions, but careless with their words. They would never physically harm someone, but they speak sharply, gossip casually, bend the truth when convenient, or fill silence with words that serve no purpose. The Buddhist teaching on speech invites a deeper attention to this part of life, because words are actions too, and they carry real weight. The practice begins with a simple pause. Before you speak, you might notice what is about to come out. What am I about to say? What effect will it have? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Before you act, the same pause. What am I about to do? Who will be affected? Is this aligned with the person I am becoming, or is it pulling me in a direction I do not want to go? These pauses are tiny. They take almost no time, but they create a space between impulse and action, and in that space, ethics lives. The Buddhist tradition calls this yoniso manasikara, wise attention. It is the practice of bringing awareness to the moment before the action, rather than only to the consequences after. This is where all the perfections come together. The pause before speaking requires truthfulness, to see what is actually arising in you. It requires wisdom to understand the likely effect of your words. It requires patience. King requires patience to wait rather than react. It requires loving kindness, to care about the person you are speaking to. In a single moment of ethical attention, many perfections are active at once. Over time, this kind of attention becomes natural. You do not have to deliberate over every word or every choice. The pausing becomes built into the way you move through the world, like the way an experienced driver checks the mirrors without thinking about it. Sila becomes a reflex of care. And when you live this way, something happens that you might not expect. You sleep better. There is nothing to replay, nothing to regret, nothing to worry about having said or done. The day ends clean, and you can rest. In Buddhism, this is called the happiness of blamelessness. It is one of the simplest and most underrated forms of well-being. A clear conscience, a heart with nothing to hide, a life that can bear examination. This is the quiet reward of Sila. And like all the perfections, it begins small and grows with practice. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight. You simply bring a little more attention to the next conversation, the next choice, the next moment where action is called for. And over time, the attention becomes a way of being, and the way of being becomes who you are. We have now explored all 10 perfections of the heart: truthfulness, wisdom, equanimity, resolve, patience, loving kindness, generosity, renunciation, energy, and ethics. 10 qualities that support and strengthen one another. 10 ways of meeting life that, taken together, describe what it looks like when a human being is moving toward freedom. None of them require perfection. The word perfection in this context does not mean flawlessness. It means fullness. Each quality, given enough time and practice, moves naturally toward its fullest expression. And along the way, even the smallest steps matter. Even the first pause before speaking. Even the first honest look inward. even the first act of giving. Buddhism teaches that these 10 qualities are both the path and the destination. You practice them in order to grow, and as you grow, they become the natural expression of who you are. Generosity flows out of you. Patience becomes your default. Wisdom deepens without effort. The qualities that once required practice become simply the way you live. There is something beautiful in this. At the beginning, you cultivate these qualities through effort. At the end, they cultivate themselves through you. The seeds you planted become trees, and the trees bear fruit, and the fruit contains new seeds. The cycle continues, not because you are forcing it, but because that is what living things do when they are given room to grow. Rest here for a moment. You have traveled a long way tonight. Let yourself be still. Let the teachings settle wherever they want to settle. There is nothing to hold, nothing to remember, nothing to do. Simply rest. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.